Joe Rogan Podcast, check it out.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Train by day, Joe Rogan Podcast by night, all day.
What's up, Joe? Good to be
brother.
back.
Good to see you. Good to see you. What are you doing in town?
I came in. I was doing my buddy Scott Horton's show and hanging out with him for a little bit. And
And
here.
you're looking for a place to escape.
Yeah, exactly.
New York, Schultz told me that New York is like they just won World War III. People are dancing in the streets.
I was there in Union Square the other day. We did a show at the Stand, and it was the day they called it for Biden. And as much as I just despise Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, it was kind of nice for the city to just have one.
Yeah.
Just to have a day. It's the only day that it's felt happy there since March.
Here, too, people were honking in the streets. I went to dinner with Tom Segura. He was in town, and we were driving down the streets. People were honking and cheering, and people were so happy. I'm happy for people to be happy.
Yeah,
I like that.
Even if they're happy for a stupid reason,
Well,
you're like, at least be happy.
it's too complicated. And you're a guy who knows a lot about politics and the way the world works, but it's too complicated to really go into depth about it for most people. So many people just have this sort of cursory understanding of politics, and then they follow a narrative. The narrative is Trump is bad, you get him out, Biden's good. And then you go, yeah, well, what about the crime bill? What about the Iraq war? What about this and that and that and that? What about what she did? Nobody wants to hear it. Nobody wants to hear it.
Yeah.
All they want to say is the good guys won. Now we're going to go back to being America again.
Yeah.
And then Pfizer announces a new vaccine.
Well, it would be nice if we could go back to being America again. I think we're
Yeah.
still far off from that happening. But you're right that I think most people, and it's not just politics, it's true with everything in life. Like, most people have expertise in very limited areas. And for everything else, you're kind of just trusting what somebody else tells you.
Yeah, and especially with politics, it's so. I know very little about it, even though I've read a lot about it. I'm like, what is all this? You know, there's some fuckery going on, and you know there's a lot of special interests, and there's a lot of money, and there's a lot of shenanigans. But it's like, to really know how this stuff works, to really understand lobbyists, to really understand how bills get passed, to really understand Congress, to really understand the Senate, like, you got a deep dive for years.
Yeah, and then you still don't know a lot of it. I mean, you can go based off, say, like, what's been declassified that the CIA has
Right.
been doing, but what do we not know? I mean,
Oh,
and there's
yeah.
a whole lot that we don't know. But I think we know enough to know that it stinks, that there's a lot of corruption. And in many ways, I think that's what Trump, at least the people who support Trump, saw him as the guy who was outside that system, who was kind of fighting for them. Not saying that's the truth,
Right.
but I think that's what a lot of Trump supporters saw in him.
Yeah, that was the simplistic comic book version of what Trump was to them. Is like, and that's where like that QAnon stuff all comes in, and people thinking that it's really like this plot to stop child molesters and
Yeah. Well, and the system is always corrupt enough to give cover to the wildest conspiracy theory, because they are already, like, you could say, okay, well, perhaps, QAnon conspiracy theorists believe some really crazy shit, but then you just go, but look at what happened with this Jeffrey Epstein guy. I mean, there really was this child sex trafficking ring that was covered up. I mean, we have that woman on ABC News who was basically saying, I broke the story, and my bosses
Yeah.
told me no.
I think it was NBC.
Was it NBC?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Oh, we broke the story, but they wanted to protect access to the royal family. So we would let a powerful multimillionaire or billionaire child sex trafficking ring leader go skate because we wanted access to the royal family.
What the fuck, dude? How about that video where the interview where Prince Andrew? It's Andrew, right? Princess Andrew. Prince. I misgendered him. I'm so sorry. Prince Andrew is on television with that lady, and they're asking him questions about whether or not he was there and what happened, and you could see this look in his face like he's never really been questioned before.
Yeah.
The fact that he agreed to do that is so weird. Like, it's almost like he doesn't understand what a trap is. Look, I've never been trapped before. I'm a royal.
Yeah.
Is he a royal anymore, or did they kick him out? Something happened?
I'm not sure.
They can kick you out.
Yeah, they can.
They kicked out the dude who hooked up with the actress.
Yeah, he wanted to bail. I think he left.
I think he left too, but he wanted to go back for something. They go, nah, son.
You're done.
Wasn't there something recent, Jamie? Wasn't there some weird? Which one's he? Harry? Or is that Harry Potter? Am I thinking of Harry Potter?
I think you're right. It's Harry. Yeah, I think you confused me with the Harry Potter.
I just think it's fucking so preposterous that we literally don't know anything that guy's done other than that he's a prince. Prince Harry saddened and disappointed that his request for Remembrance Day wreath was denied. Oh no. The Duke of Sussex.
You know, we spend a lot of time...
Look at that name. Sussex.
Yeah.
Was saddened and disappointed at the decision to snub his request for a wreath to be laid out at the National Memorial in London.
Man, the level of suffering that he must go through to not get his royal wreath.
Yeah.
Prince Andrew did not attend.
Yeah, I wonder why. Yeah, I don't think they let him. Decorated war hero. Oh. What? Prince Andrew's a decorated war hero? What did he do?
That's news to me.
High-pressed buttons had led to victory.
Yeah, I have a feeling the prince wasn't on the front line. They weren't just like throwing him out.
He's a Royal Navy helicopter pilot in the war with Argentina to recapture the Falkland Islands in the 1980s and returned as a hero. I didn't even know there was a war with Argentina in the 1980s. Oh, I remember the Falkland Islands. I remember the name.
Yeah, this smells like bullshit to me. I don't believe he's a war hero for a second.
I'm a war hero and a royal. I demand a 16-year-old girl.
Well, when you say it like that, I mean, all right, we'll see what we can get you.
It's just amazing that Epstein guy roped so many people into that shit.
Mm-hmm.
It's real weird, man. It's real weird when something that creepy turns out to be true.
Yeah, and it's very revealing. I mean, it's like, so if you had an honest press, you know, if they weren't every bit as corrupt as those conspiracy theorists think they are, you would think that the fact that, say, like a former president was on his flight logs would have led to a huge scandal where they would really want to get to the bottom of that. You would think right now they'd still want to get to the bottom of that. Like, hey, who else was involved in this? What did it? Now, okay, he was on his plane. We don't know that that means that Bill Clinton was involved in the worst aspects of it. But you would think the press would at least want to find that out. And there's very little interest.
No, because the press goes after Bill Clinton, then Hillary Clinton gets somehow or another connected to it, and then that could sink Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and that's bad for the people that hate Donald Trump.
Well,
Jeffrey
that's
Epstein's
for sure.
Palm Beach mansion to be demolished. Oh my God! Local real estate developer says he's in contract to buy the waterfront estate and is planning to knock it down and build a new home. That's the smart move.
$22 million house.
Oh shit! Yeah, well, it's expensive down there. Meanwhile, it's going to be underwater in like 5 years, according to Al Gore. Right?
But I also read he left it to a Christian group, which I was trying to find too. So I don't know which one of those two stories. This is in the Wall Street Journal, so I'll believe that over he left it to someone.
Do you think they just have to knock it down just because it's his? Mm-hmm. So they kind of have to?
Yeah.
Do you think it'd be awkward if there was like part of it they wanted to keep?
When I was looking at real estate in Boulder, the house where the little girl was killed, what is her name? The little girl who's in the JonBenet Ramsey. That house has been for sale forever. They can't sell it. I think they even changed the address. They might have even changed the name of the street, trying to sell it, and they just couldn't sell it. Because I remember we were looking at it, like, this house is nice. Like, why is it so cheap? It's one of those deals. And then you find out, you're like, oh, fuck.
Because if you can afford a nice house, you'd probably prefer not the one that a little girl was killed in.
Nobody wants that house.
Yeah.
Nobody wants that house.
What are they going to do with the one in New York? It says it's listed at $88 million.
I'm going to buy it. I'm moving to New York. I'm moving the show to New York. Right. I'm buying it as long as it comes with the painting of Bill Clinton in the blue dress.
I've heard it's set up with a lot of equipment, so we should be able to do a show.
Okay, let's do it. Oh, yeah, it streams right to the CIA. You don't even have to get them to watch you on YouTube. They get a live feed. Yeah, I'm gonna buy that house.
All right.
Fuck it.
Let's do it.
Why not?
It's pretty epic.
It's probably a really good investment. Probably worth $89 million eventually.
Yeah, and then
70 or something. So it's already gone up.
And then if you try to sell it, it'll be like, oh, this was Joe Rogan's place. It won't have that Epstein, stink on it anymore.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
I think it's a good move. I support
talk to
it.
my guy. See if I can make it happen. I wouldn't buy a fucking newsstand in New York City. I don't believe in New York City anymore. I don't. I think that de Blasio guy has ruined that place for a solid 10 years.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think
we got the fans on here, right? I could smoke the cigar.
They were. I'll go double check.
Okay.
Yeah, here it says it's for sale right now. Gargantuan New York City mansion, home to Epstein horrors.
Oh, you can rent it.
not a great
$30,000
way.
a month.
Yeah, bam.
That's what we need to do. We need to just rent it.
Could do a month of podcast.
You know what we should do? We should fill it up with homeless people.
And then leave.
Just rent it and just let homeless people live there.
Oh, you're
Just tell them we want one room to do the podcast, and then we'll have security that makes sure the homeless people don't go in that room. Everything else, you do whatever you want.
That actually sounds like a Bill de Blasio plan that you're putting into effect. That's
Yeah,
more or
it's
less what he's been doing.
progressive.
Yeah.
It's progressive.
Yeah, there you go.
Imagine if we did that. Imagine.
They'd probably give you a freaking medal. Bill de Blasio would probably celebrate you for doing it.
That guy's so silly. You know that's not his real name.
Yeah, I do know that.
It's got like a German name.
Uh-huh, yeah.
Yeah.
He's a very, very weird guy.
Oh, he's the weirdest.
And really committed to his weird ideology that he wants, to not just when things get back to normal. They can't get back to the regular normal. It's got to be this more, inclusive normal. And so he's taken it upon himself that he's going to try to remake New York City in his progressive image. While the city's going through the worst year it's been through in my lifetime.
He's an odd duck. I don't know how he got there. I don't live there, so I don't understand it. But New York City, tell me if this is true, but I'm pretty sure, Jamie, that 1% of the people in New York City pay 50% of the taxes.
That sounds reasonable. Yeah.
The fact that you could piss those people off and still be mayor is hilarious.
Yeah.
Like, how does...
Well, they still only get one vote each. So, that's kind of the way it works.
That's cute. What you just said is cute. Like, it really works that way. It's just one person, one vote. That's it.
Yep.
No one has any additional influence at all.
Well, no, but I'm just saying that if you can win elections by playing to other people, and also that, some of those people kind of like the progressive rhetoric.
Look at this. Look at this statistic. It's bananas. The highest earning 1% of New York City residents generated 43% of the city income taxes and 51% of the New York state income taxes collected from individuals living in the city as of 2016. That's crazy. That's so much money.
And then you hear all this stuff about paying your fair share.
Jesus.
And it's like, so where exactly does that come in? Is that not enough?
Well, that's like LA, right? It's like a lot of people felt like even though the taxes were exorbitant, it was worth it because LA pre-COVID was pretty badass. The Comedy Store for us, obviously I'm comedy centric, but the Comedy Store was open. The restaurants were amazing. There's so many things to do. It's just, it's crowded, but the people are cool as fuck. It's like there's a lot of good things. And then as soon as COVID hit, everybody was like, why are we here?
Yeah.
Like, why am I paying so much? And then they start talking about raising the taxes to 16+% state taxes. That's more than I give my agent.
Yeah, right.
You imagine?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, and it's I think that also happened. I think even more so in New York, because when New York, it's the same thing. It's like, well, it's expensive. You pay a ton for your rent or to own or whatever. But it's like the best museums, the best nightlife, the best food, the best all these things. Yeah. But then all of a sudden, when the lockdowns hit, now people are like locked down in a 1-bedroom apartment that they could get a house for, anywhere else in the country. And a lot of people started to re-question, why am I here?
And people started looking real pale. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of my friends that lived there, they would go out very rarely. And when you see them, they'd be like real sunken in. And like, that is the worst look for your immune system. Because, you're not getting any vitamin D.
Yeah.
You're not out there at all.
Well, that's the terrible irony of this whole thing, right? Is that it really ended up fucking over so many people's immune systems because the worst thing you could do, like the best thing you could do for COVID is have your immune system in good shape.
Yeah.
And the worst thing you could do for your immune system is like stay inside all day, be in a constant state of anxiety, don't get sun, don't get fresh air, eat like shit, drink too much. It's everything.
And have no money.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're out of work, so the incredible pressure on you.
Yeah. And we may never know exactly what the total human cost of all of that was, but we'll get more of a sense of it over the next few years.
Yeah, it's sort of a disingenuous argument because they're comparing the total cost of the lockdown to the lost lives because of the pandemic. The problem is if there wasn't a lockdown, the loss of lives would be far greater, and so you're comparing it to a different thing.
Well,
because they're saying you shouldn't lock down. No one should have ever locked down. But if they didn't lock down, how many more people would have died? It's a real good question.
No,
right?
it's a lot of people like to make this a simplistic calculation, and it's an enormously complicated one because there's many different variables on both sides. So how many lives were saved by locking down? I think it's very debatable. I don't really know that it's but I don't claim to know.
I think for sure it was some.
Quite possibly, but then you'd also have to look just first, apples to apples, how many lives were cost from the lockdown. And I've read stuff, I was reading the other day, it was in England, but I'm sure the same is true here, that cancer screenings have like plummeted over the last year. So now there's going to be all types of preventable cancers that are going to, we won't know this for years if we can ever really trace it back, but a whole bunch of people will die from that. Depression has been way up. Suicides seem to be going up. There's all these different costs. And then, of course, what is the cost, the human cost of destroying people's livelihoods?
Right.
And it's very, very hard to weigh these things out. And as you pointed out, you'd have to weigh it versus the cost of lives without the lockdown, not necessarily with. But it's like with a lot of these other issues. People like to make it a very simplistic, well, if you want to prevent the virus, you have to be for the solution.
Right.
Same with climate change. If you want to prevent climate change, you got to be for the Green New Deal. But the truth is that the real answer is like, well, what is this going to cost versus what is this going to cost, and which one is worse?
Yeah.
Which sucks because you have to think.
Well, it's really important to have lively debate on these things. And one of the things that's going on now is people are trying to shut down debate. They want you to agree with their side. And this is something that social media has really reinforced, right? Like social media echo chambers. They want you to be on their side. And if you're not on their side, they just hit you with a bunch of bullshit about why you shouldn't, and why you're on the wrong side of history, and why you're a bad person. And we were talking before the podcast about lists that people are making, about people who supported Donald Trump or people who voted for Donald Trump or people who worked in the administration. They're making these lists. And like literally blacklists. Like they have no irony about suggesting these blacklists. Like you're going to Soviet Russia type shit. Like this is
right. And meanwhile, Joe Biden is saying in his acceptance speech that well, now's the time to bring everybody together.
Yeah.
Like we all need to be one. Yada yada. Which is kind of a nice thought. But it's a little hard to take seriously when all of these people in your party and who have been, supporting you have been calling everybody else on the other side, white supremacists, Nazis for the last 4 years, to now that you're claiming you won, say, hey, we all have to come together. Meanwhile, other members of your party are saying, we got to create lists of people. So like this.
Well, AOC said it.
Yeah. A pretty influential member of the Democrats, which, she's made herself like huge.
She's going to be president.
I don't know about that.
She could do it.
She's not very popular outside of her district.
I don't know about that. I think with young people, she represents like this idea that someone like her, young, hardworking, out there hustling, seriously progressive values, that you can get pretty far, and certainly in the public eye.
Well, you certainly can do what she's doing. I mean, she's proved that. Like, you could go to a very blue district and primary one of the most establishment Democrats and rise to national prominence. So she did that. I don't know. Right now in the country, I think AOC would have a really tough time getting elected on a national level. But
maybe.
Who knows? Maybe
she's only 30.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah, so she's got a lot of time. Boy, when I was 30, I was so fucking stupid. It's kind of amazing. Not that I'm not that stupid now. I'm fairly stupid now, but boy, when I was 30, I was dumb.
Yeah, well,
kind of amazing.
She has
She's
a little bit of that too.
Well, everybody does when they're 30. Bridget Fetisi. Bridget Fetisi read some of her writing that she wrote when she was 24. She's like, oh my God, I was basically AOC. She's like, I was such a lefty. I was so delusional. She goes, and now I'm just so much more of a realist. My worry about this Biden thing is that people voted for Biden because they hate Trump. They didn't vote for Biden because he's a leader that they respect and they want and they admire, and like he's going to lead us out of it. Like if Obama was calling for unity, if he was the guy that was the president and he was calling for unity, we've got to abandon all these ideas, about division. We're all together. And he brought everybody together again. That might work. People might recognize that this really intelligent guy with this message of unity should be listened to.
Well, but that did happen, right? I mean, that happened in 2008. That's what Obama said when he won. And there was some a decent amount of unity. I think he had over 70% approval rating when he first came in. I mean, it wasn't certainly anything like the country is now.
Right.
But at the end of 8 years of Obama, you had a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and Donald fucking Trump elected president. So we had that, but it didn't matter because even with such a charismatic guy like Obama calling for unity and saying a lot of the right things, at least at first, the policies and what was actually happening in the country were really fucking over huge numbers of people. And then also things that might have been somewhat out of Obama's control, but not completely out, is that the era of, it was like the Obama recovery, which was the most like cronyist, corrupt recovery ever, and the woke lecturing all rose up at the same time in the Obama years. Not all of it his fault, but some of it is.
Do you see that Kamala Harris has her gender pronouns in her bio on Twitter now?
Oh, yeah. I saw her say that in a CNN town hall when she was still running for president. She came out and just, no one even asked her. She just went, I'm Kamala Harris. My genders are she, her.
No!
What the fuck is this? What is going on?
No! Did you see what Giannis Pappas wrote?
No.
He wrote, my gender is he, haw. He's like, I'm going to start a trend here. I recognize as he, haw.
That's great.
I might take that on, too. I might do that. He, haw. I like it.
It's a very strange thing.
There it is.
Oh, it's in his bio?
Hee-haw. Scientist and journalist, he wrote.
Oh, that's fucking great.
It's hilarious.
I think, though, people like if you really did care about unity or whatever, which I think is like something that maybe we should care about a little bit.
Sure.
Like, I mean, not that we all have to like agree on everything, or I don't like this. We don't have to all be one and all have the same, attitude about everything. But when you see what's going on in the country over this year, the culture war shit is really scary, and like people should be appropriately concerned about that. When you see what's going on in what's going on in Portland this year, where you had like the fucking, militias facing off against each other. You have like the Antifa versus the Proud Boys type shit. It's like they're playing pretend civil war.
Yeah.
It's kind of a game.
They're LARPing.
Right. But it's kind of not that far off.
Right,
you know
because
what
people
I mean?
got shot and killed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are people on guns staring each other down. And for everybody, for every sane person, should be like, you do not want to see a civil war in this fucking country. I don't care how much fun you think this is right now in the moment. You don't want this to actually come to you holding your buddy's head while he bleeds out and screams for his mom. Like, you don't want that. So the idea of toning that down is a good idea. But I think the only way to do that is to understand why Donald Trump was president to begin with. And that, like, to me, the big story of all of this isn't that Joe Biden looks like he's going to be the president. That's kind of boring to me. It's like, yeah, Joe Biden got elected. He's been getting elected for fucking almost 50 years. Like, what? Okay. The story is still that Donald Trump won the presidency, and then 4 years later got like millions more votes than he got the first time, and almost by a hair almost won it again. I mean, that's like pretty fucking crazy. Did you see when he was in Pennsylvania and he drew 53,000 people to his rally in central Pennsylvania?
Yeah.
And they start off, the first like 4 minutes of it are a chant, "We love you. We love you." I mean, like, what the fuck is that? What's going on here? And to just kind of dismiss it, like the corporate press attitude is like, well, it's racism. I think there's a little bit more.
Failure of the education system.
I mean, I always agree with failure of the education system. That is always an acceptable answer. But I think a big
It's a
part
rejection
of
of looting. It's a rejection of the woke culture. It's a rejection of being called a racist and being called a fascist.
That's a big part of it.
It's a lot of this call for a radical shift in the identity of America.
Well, I think that's a huge part of it. I also think that if you're the woke lecturing is almost like just the insult on top. Like, if you're one of these people who lives in these towns, you've seen for decades now, like, factories disappear, jobs get outsourced, the life expectancy has gone down, suicides have gone up. You're one of these some guy in central Pennsylvania or all over the country, and You probably lost your job. Now you're working a shittier job. You never really came back from where you were after 2008. Maybe you got a son who's addicted to opioids. You got another son who, like, has never been the same since he got back from one of these stupid wars. And then after all that, the people who sent you there are now lecturing you about your white privilege. And then Donald Trump, all it really took was Donald Trump came in and said, you know what? I'm for you.
Yeah.
I'm for you. I'm not for the Mexicans or the Muslims. I'm not for this woke shit. I'm for you, and I want you to win.
It's
and
a simplistic message.
Sure.
And that's one of the things that he got across. He
Yeah.
he boiled down the whole thing to, like, make America great again. Like, that's a simplistic message. And to people that want to sort of, like, they really, some country music songs. I by the way, I'm a fan of country music. I like a lot of country music. But a lot of country music I don't like because I know what you're doing. You're just trying to box everything into this real simple, we're going to go down to the lake. We're going to have ourselves a drink. You know what I'm saying? We're going to take my truck. Everything's going to be great. I miss my grandma. Like, there's like this simplistic, really boiled down worldview. And it comforts people because people are scared of nuance and they're scared of the complexity of life.
Yes. And Donald Trump was a master at that.
Yeah.
Boiling things down to a real simple slogan, a real, simple phrase that people can wrap their heads around and get behind. But there's also that on the opposition to Trump's side where they try to boil things down to, like, well, it was racism or it was white supremacy or something like that. Yeah. And you're like, there's a lot more going on here. And I really think that if, like, these people on some level recognize that they've been screwed over by the establishment, forgotten by them, and that they are hated by the establishment, which is true. They're right about that. And so they wanted someone to fight for them. And I think Trump represents that to them. I don't think he really was that from my perspective. I think he's kind of a con artist. But I do think that he tapped into something that's really powerful and that actually could get a lot worse if there's not some kind of, like, reconciling with it.
Yeah, how does it get better now? That's the real question. Like, because how does it get better with Biden and Kamala Harris? I mean, unless people realize that things aren't going to change for the better with them in office.
Well, I think that realization is going to come
about a year and a half
soon.
from now.
Yeah, something like that, maybe. Maybe even sooner, because things move fast these days.
Yeah.
But I do think that one of the things that's interesting with Biden and Kamala Harris is that a lot of these, like, super progressive people are celebrating right now because Trump was out, and so Trump was defeated. And they feel like they helped get Biden and Kamala Harris in, they were certainly a portion of helping them. And then Trump also is the one who is saying, like, well, Joe Biden, he's just a Trojan horse for AOC and Ilhan Omar. He's a Trojan horse for socialism, which is actually complete bullshit. Joe Biden, if anything, is a Trojan horse for Dick Cheney. Joe Biden is a Trojan horse for the establishment, war hawks, big banks, corporate elite, tech giants.
Well, look at the people he's filling his cabinet
Yeah,
with.
it's going to be them.
He's filling his cabinet with Republicans.
Mm-hmm. But those Republicans.
Yes.
But those Republicans.
Yeah.
The ones who basically caused this whole mess to begin with.
One of the things that Trump said during his campaign, he's saying, talking about how much money that Joe Biden raised, he said, I could raise that money too, but I'd have to make those deals, and then I'd have to be compromised. And when he was saying that, I was like, he's right.
He's not wrong about that one.
He's not wrong about that, because if he decided to play ball with all those guys, like, they would have got behind him, and the narrative would have switched.
Yeah, that's for sure. And it's interesting. It's a really important question that people might want to ponder. Even people who really hate Donald Trump, and you can really hate Donald Trump, that's fine. But you might wonder why it is that the establishment hates him so much. And I have my guess is that it's not for the same reasons that your left-wing friend hates Donald Trump. Like, I don't buy for a fucking second that the CIA and the Republican establishment hated Donald Trump because he said mean things about Mexicans. Like, I just don't buy that for a fucking second. These are people who will slaughter brown people in third world countries and lose no sleep over it. Like, I don't buy that's why they hated him. I think what they hated about Donald Trump was that he was a wild man who would blurt out things. And he'd blurt out a lot of crazy shit, but then he'd also blurt out the truth. And that was something that you're not supposed to say that. Like when Donald Trump was running in 2016, he stood on the Republican primary debate stage in South Carolina, Republicans in South Carolina, and looked at Jeb Bush in the eyes and said, your brother lied us into war in Iraq. And everyone was like, what the fuck? Like, you can't say that at the Republican South Carolina. And all the pundits, all the media class, they were like, Trump's finished now. Because you can't. These are the people who fought the war in Iraq. And these are the most pro-military people around. And the next day at the primary, Donald Trump took 60%, and all the other Republicans, all 12 of them, split the other 40%.
Imagine if he didn't say a lot of the dumb shit that he said. Like the shit about McCain. Like, I like people don't get caught.
Well, imagine he didn't say that.
Imagine he didn't say the dumbest shit. The dumbest shit that he said. Remember the Gold Star family? The family where... the
Khan family, I believe?
Yeah. Where he criticized the family about I forget what the exact...
It was they spoke at the DNC,
right,
and then he started trashing them.
Yes. And their son died representing this country in war. And everybody was like, well, you can't... That's it. He's done. Nope.
Wasn't done.
Imagine if he didn't do that.
Well, by the way, when that happened, I remember just screaming about this on my podcast, whereas I was just like, the response was right there, and it took him like 4 days, but eventually he did get it right, where he was just like, yeah, they died in a war that Hillary Clinton supported. What? That's the response.
Is this a new one? Trump suggests Gold Star families may be to blame for his infection?
I think it was the second thing.
Oh, yeah. No, this is a different thing than what we were
This is
talking
new.
about.
The president, who is counting on support from the military members and their families, suggests that for a second time in a week that they might have spread the coronavirus at the White House. Also, this is different Gold Star families.
That's the only president.
But hold on a second. Is that a real direct quote? The problem is I don't...
Yeah, you got to actually
This is New York
see.
Times.
Well.
New York Times has gone full woke. They want to hug me. They want to kiss me. And they do, frankly. I'm not telling them to back up. I'm not doing it. But I did say it's obviously dangerous. Okay.
All right. That's not exactly
the same
blaming
thing.
them.
Yeah, that's not the same thing. He's just telling them the truth. Yeah. See, that's the other thing too. This quote that they keep reiterating this thing. He had disparaged American troops who died in wars as losers and suckers. But they're saying this in quotes.
Yes, because it was quoted by some anonymous source who claims that he said that.
Yeah, but that is... How do you do that? Multiple sources. See, but you can say that. You can say multiple sources. But unless the people go on record, it seems like a very disingenuous thing to say.
Yeah, well, did you see the guy who was...
right, isn't that... Am I wrong about that?
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. Did you see the guy who revealed his identity, who was the guy who was behind that New York Times story?
Yeah,
and
anonymous.
They said high-level... Yeah, anonymous.
Yeah.
They said high-level executive. And then there were all these people in the media speculating, and they were like, well, the New York Times wouldn't do this unless this was a really high-level person. It was basically like, wink, wink, this might be Pence. This might be, Jared Kushner. This could be anybody saying this shit. And then it turns out it's like, oh, this was like some guy who was once a chief of staff at the Department of Homeland Security. Now, I'm not saying that's nothing, but it's not at all what you were kind of making people think. So I think it's a very shady way to do journalism. And that's one of the things that I think is like one of the bright spots of the Trump administration. One of the best things that he was able to draw out was how agenda-driven the corporate press is. And you can agree with their agenda on hating Donald Trump. Maybe that's how you feel. But it's still something everybody knows now that they are agenda-driven. They're not here like, we just give you the information.
They're activists.
Yes.
That's the rise of the activist journalist is... I understand from their perspective that they feel like they have this platform to do a good thing. But I feel like you do the best thing by telling the cold, hard facts and letting people who are actually advocates activists rather, do the activist work with those cold, hard facts.
I have no problem with that. If you want to be an activist, go be an activist.
Yeah, but I think
just be honest.
As a journalist, though, I think it's it's real slippery when you do things like that, like those quotes, losers and suckers. Unless you know who said it, unless they're willing to go on record and say, I heard him say it, then you don't necessarily have a story. It's not
Right.
the same. And how did he say it?
Yes.
What was the?
And particularly if he denies it.
Yeah.
So if, like if I were to just say, oh, Joe told me this thing
Right.
last month, and you go, I never said that.
Right.
You can't just run with it and quote that you
Right.
said it because
But it's
you have
like
no way of knowing.
The grab him by the pussy thing. You heard it, right?
Well, that was
that's
said.
real.
That was said.
That was there, right? So anything else, it's just so strange. I know, I understand their position, that they're coming from this place where they feel like they can do a lot of good. They can change opinions, and they feel like the country's going in a bad direction. And they felt like with Donald Trump, this country's sliding into this horrible fascist state, and they want to do everything they can to prevent it. And they have the green light from all the other people that are there. But like all this stuff, these lessons that have been learned in the past about why it's so important to be totally honest and unbiased in terms of disseminating information. Like you have to kind of do that. And then other people are supposed to take that information that you've disseminated unbiased and have these perspectives and debate both sides. That's what's supposed to happen. The problem is when you get this distorted perception from the media that's very biased and that is not objective at all. It's like you're trying to lean towards a very particular conclusion that they think is right. They think is the good thing. But when you do that, then you don't have who is the Walter Mondale or who's not Walter Mondale, Walter Cronkite? Who is the unbiased journalist? Who's the one that we trust for information? It used to be the New York Times. The New York Times used to be like brutally honest about basically everything. And now you read something in the New York Times like we did when you go, oh, it's the New York Times though.
Yeah.
Like that's a weird shift that's happened in the last 10 years. Like less.
Yeah, but
right?
I mean, it's definitely been like exposed in the last 10 years. But I think that truthfully, I think it's kind of a silver lining that at least people are starting to be aware of that. People are starting to go like, okay, I know that these institutions are not to be trusted. Because truthfully speaking, they got, it's like I was saying to you before we started, where it's like for all the shit that people give Alex Jones, he got all of the biggest stories right over the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying he didn't get anything wrong, but really, really big things like should we go to war in Iraq?
Yeah.
Should we bail out bankers? Should all of this? He called these as lies and corruption right away. And the New York Times was selling all of these. I mean, they sold the war in Iraq. And so to me, it's not the worst thing in the world if people at least recognize that these institutions are completely compromised. And I agree with you that there is a role for objective journalism, but I would at least accept if they were like, hey, listen, we think, like what you just said, we think we have this platform and we need to use this to get Donald Trump not elected. At least be honest with it. Don't bullshit me and tell me we're just doing objective news and every single story is about how Donald Trump needs to.
They don't
be
even
taken
address
out.
it. They don't say they're doing objective news anymore. They just do their thing.
Well, they call other news fake news. So they'll say
The New York Times doesn't.
Well, the New York Times may not, but I'm speaking in the corporate press in general.
Right.
They'll say like, well, there's fake news out on the internet, and even the New York Times has done stories about how social media companies need to do more to, combat
Right.
fake news on the internet and things like
But
that.
they're talking about like super hardcore QAnon type shit, aren't they?
Well, kind of. I mean, it starts with that, and then they'll use that as an example. But then usually they also go to other things, like, look, this New York Post story about Hunter Biden's laptop was called fake news from the day it came out, to the point that not only would all of the corporate press not report on it, but that social media companies were banning the link, and Twitter froze the New York Post's Twitter account.
One of the CNN journalists on Twitter called it Russian disinformation.
Yes, there's a bunch of people called it Russian disinformation.
I wonder if it was Russian disinformation, the photo of the girl giving him a foot job.
Yes.
Was that Russian?
That was all. She was Russian, and the foot was Russian. It was a Russian foot job.
What happened to that? I kind of lost track of what was happening with the laptop, but they have they shared information of it?
Rudy Giuliani sold it on eBay.
Is that what's going on at the landscaping
Made a
thing?
killing.
At the Four Seasons landscaping event?
I don't know. This is the
Well-
thing that's going on. There's almost like too much information is coming at us.
Well, look, it's basically been verified that this was Hunter Biden's laptop. I mean, within any reasonable standard for a journalist to verify something. I mean, number one, the Bidens didn't deny it. Like, nobody actually came out and denied that this was. They had his signature at the repair shop, which they matched up to his signature. They've had other people on the email chains confirm that these were emails between them and Hunter Biden. So it's been pretty reasonably kind of verified that this was Hunter Biden. Now, I don't know about the crazier accusations that were made there. I mean, Rudy Giuliani said that there were pictures of underage girls and stuff like that. I don't know if that's true or not. But Rudy Giuliani did turn it over to the Delaware police. That is true, because the Delaware, a spokesman for the Attorney General, said that they received the laptop and that they sent it to the FBI. Now, I don't know why he would turn this over claiming this stuff was on there, and then they would send this to the FBI if there wasn't something, but I don't know. But what you do know, right, is that this was a story where they had these emails about Hunter Biden, who is very clearly a swamp creature, who was selling his father's name to rake in money from foreign companies. Now, truth be told, that's a kind of run-of-the-mill scandal as far as politics go.
Normal.
It's normal. Every senator's kid, family, wife, they all do stuff like this all the time. It's a corrupt swamp, you know? But it's a story, nonetheless. It may not be but to just make the conscious decision that we are a few weeks out from a presidential election, this can harm Biden, and therefore we're not mentioning it. We're not covering it. We're not trying to debunk this to a bunch of people. We are trying to make sure people never get their eyes on this.
Well, I think
That's
they
creepy.
felt the heat. They felt the heat from 2016, from the Hillary Clinton email debate. You know, like whether or not she should have deleted those emails, and that the fact that Comey then opens up the investigation again in the middle of the campaign, and that was basically what even though she won the popular vote, a lot of people felt like that was a bad move.
Yeah.
And so this year they said, we're going to do everything we can to get rid of Donald Trump. Again, they become activists instead of just journalists.
Yeah.
And it's tricky.
Well, that's 100% what happened. I mean, they felt in a way that they were responsible for Donald Trump winning.
Ex-Hunter Biden associates records don't show proof of Biden business relationship amid unanswered questions.
This is on Fox News.
Well, Fox News has taken a turn, ladies and gentlemen. They seem to have made a conscious internal decision to not favor Donald Trump anymore.
I don't think Fox News was ever that behind Donald Trump. I mean, there's a few people at Fox News who are hardcore behind Donald Trump. But as an organization, I mean, remember, they were very hostile to him in the Republican primary. He wasn't the Fox News guy. Jeb Bush was the Fox News guy. And I think a lot of people are very happy to get rid of him.
Let me see that article again. This is interesting. I wonder what that means. Ex-Hunter Biden associates records don't show. But what does that mean?
So they don't.
But listen to this. Ex-Hunter Biden's associates' records don't show proof of Biden business relationship amid unanswered questions. That doesn't mean much.
No, well, what he claimed was that, and they're saying Joe Biden, that he couldn't prove Joe Biden was, it's a very confusing title, because he claimed that he had met with Joe Biden and Joe Biden was aware of all the dealings that Hunter was doing.
Here it is. Fox News has reviewed emails from, look at that name, Bobulinski. Related to the venture, and they don't show that the elder Biden had business dealings. Yeah, but see, that's weird. Like, you know, we could say that Jamie is my business associate, right? And if I'm involved in some shady shit and Jamie doesn't know about it, and Jamie and I are emailing back and forth, and they get into Jamie's emails and they say, Joe Rogan's business associate doesn't show any association.
Isn't that what they're making the claim is that this is the evidence, is the emails, though. They're like, hey, we found some emails, and the emails say this, and now they're saying this. According to Fox News, they're like, that's not what they say.
Right, but the emails to who? Is it to that guy? Because if it's not to that guy, then this is not relative, and then they're playing games with words. Like, I would have to read what exactly they're saying, what exactly he's saying.
That's part of the problem too. I've looked a couple times. That's what I was sort of just looking again. Where normally this shit gets leaked, you know, like when all the celebrities got their fucking iClouds leaked, all those pictures hit the internet instantly, and you could find them all over the place. These emails have like barely been seen by, I feel like, anybody.
Well, these emails
like you can't find them.
I believe he turned these over to the FBI. So I don't know, where they would leak from. Not to say that they couldn't leak, but I think the point of this article is that what this Bobolinsky guy claimed was that Joe Biden himself was very involved in all the business deals that Hunter and him were doing, and that his emails couldn't prove that because the thing was they said they had these references to like the big guy and stuff like that, but that they couldn't prove that Joe Biden knew about this. But he's claiming, whether this is true or not, he's claiming that he's met Joe Biden several times and they've talked about it, and Joe Biden was well aware of what Hunter Biden was doing and where he was making his money from. Again, I think it's a kind of run-of-the-mill political scandal, that aspect of it.
Yeah.
The bigger thing is like that this goes on all over the place.
Right.
I mean, all over the fucking place. Like the conflicts of interest, the corruption, where you see where Obama, spoke after he's president, we get like $400,000 or something like that for a speech in front of bankers. And he was the guy who like presided over the bank bailout. Yep. And then you get out and it's like, oh, here's what the bankers really just wanted to hear Barack Obama speak. I mean, he's a good speaker, but come on, man. Like, what's going on
Hillary
here?
got a lot of those too.
Oh, yeah.
So did Bill.
Tons of them.
Yeah. And that's where they make the bulk of their money, right? When they get out of the office, then they do these speeches.
Yeah.
Which is kind of hilarious.
Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, I believe, ballpark numbers, they left the White House, they were like net worth was around $4 million, and then it was like well over $100 million by 2016. So they made a lot of money after
we just
White
made
House.
today.
U.S. planned sale of F-35 fighter jets to UAE and $23 billion arms deal. Trump administration.
Yep.
They're saying, I was reading today, they're saying he's making a bunch of deals now on his way out.
Oh, sure. That had planned to sell 50 advanced F-35 fighters to the United Arab Emirates as a part of a broader arms deal worth more than $23 billion. That's the weird thing about someone on the way out. They can do so much.
Well, I don't know that he's on the way out. I mean,
You don't think he's on the way out?
Well, yeah, he's almost certainly on the way out, but he's going to fight it.
Yeah, but do you know how insanely difficult it is to prove, first of all, to prove that there's voter fraud, and then to prove there's enough voter fraud where they could overturn it?
It's incredibly difficult, and it's not just that he would have to do that. He'd have to do that in a few different states.
Yeah.
And so it's an incredibly difficult task, but it's pretty interesting. This is unlike anything I've ever seen before, where you have one president just saying like, no, this was bullshit, and I'm going to fight it legally. And another thing that I thought was really weird from the press is that I saw it twice now, was on MSNBC and CNN, where he was giving a press conference saying how the votes were stolen from him and the system was unfair. And they cut away. They say, we will not show this because he's lying. And then just the other day on Fox News, Neil Cavuto cut away from Trump's press secretary saying there was voter fraud. And he goes, well, we can't verify that, so we can't air this on our and it's like, look, man, whatever you want to say, this is a story.
Right.
The fact that the president is claiming voter fraud is a story. So air this and then debunk it afterward. But what is this thing where you go, no, we won't show people.
Right.
You can't see this story
Well,
because the lies could poison you or something.
What if it's proven to be true? What if there is voter fraud?
Well, there is. It's a question of how widespread it is because there's always voter fraud, which is another secret that they don't fucking like to tell. But there's always fucking some degree of voter fraud.
Do you find it odd that everybody insists that it's impossible to vote like safely and accurately online?
Yes, I find that odd. I also find it really, really odd that we overhauled the way we do voting in this country, and that now it's almost an entirely different process where both candidates are getting way more votes than they would normally get, and it's just very weird. There were a lot of things that were weird about this election, like the actual logistics of it.
Doesn't it seem like if we can bank online, we should be able to vote online? And doesn't it seem like if you could use like Apple Pay or Samsung Pay or something like that and go buy something, you use your fingerprint.
Yeah.
And it registers your fingerprint, and then you could buy a house.
Yeah, right.
I mean, how much can you spend on Apple Pay? Does it have a limit?
It's not about like that. It's the ease for everyone. Not everybody has that access. And
They need to get their shit together.
Everyone.
Get it together.
Like they had the day of the elections, they were supposed where I'm from in Columbus, Franklin County, they were supposed to have like registration via iPads or something.
Right.
And that morning they were not confident that everything got downloaded, so they just scrapped the whole thing, went back to paper. It was like that day. So it just
Isn't that also a
delayed
problem
all
with
day.
these weird deadlines? Like we have to choose the leader in the free world in 20 hours. Ready, go.
Yeah.
Like what? Isn't this a big important thing? Like do we Really want to boil this down to 20 hours?
Well, Joe, the whole process is fucking retarded.
It's
Like the
crazy.
whole thing about it. The whole thing that it's like, so the system is that we have to basically, like 10,000 votes in Wisconsin is going to determine which half of the country is furious and which half is like elated because they get to rule over the other half now. And then hopefully in 4 years they can be happy and you're miserable because they get to rule over you now. It's so bizarre. Democracy in general is a very bizarre process. To have it in a country this big with this powerful of a government, it makes it insane. Like we're going to determine the course of history based off what a few votes in swing states determine. There's got to be a better way.
I was reading this thing about about Socrates. And Socrates was, he was talking about how he didn't like the idea of democracy because Socrates felt like in order to make really important choices, you should almost have to prove your understanding of these issues. And that this, if it wasn't the case, I'm pretty sure it was Socrates. Look that up just in case.
There's got
Thank
a lot
you.
of quotes about it, apparently.
Because he saw like what we basically have. Like, there's a lot of people that were on the ballot in California. I was like, what is this guy doing? What does he want? I didn't know much about them.
Yeah.
And I was like, does that sound right? I mean, I'm looking at this thing for an hour, right? I've got an hour to go, and then I can Google some of these bills.
Right.
And that's just me. How many people didn't? I mean, I gave a very cursory review of these ideas. How many people didn't at all? They just went blue all across the board or red all across the board.
Oh, yeah. The majority, I'd say.
Yeah.
Just guessing, but I'd say the majority of people just vote their team and just don't even really look into it that much. But democracy was kind of considered like a joke before World War One. The idea of, I mean, there weren't too many like functioning democracies, and that I think that all changed with like Woodrow Wilson. We're going to make the world safe for democracy. We're going to overthrow all of these monarchs in Europe, which Europe was mostly monarchs at the time, and that ended. And then after that, you had the rise of like Lenin and Hitler and later Stalin and, you know, things that were much worse than the monarchies that they replaced.
Yeah.
But just in pure philosophy, like the idea that if 51% of people vote for something or somebody, that then it's completely morally legitimate for them to rule over the other 49% is completely absurd.
But what's the alternative?
Well, I mean, look, I think the alternative to all of this is liberty, which is the best answer, which is just basically that whether it's a democratic process or not, that the government should be so much more reduced, the power should be so much more reduced than what it is now, that it's not that consequential who gets in there because they're not wielding that much power. And as long as you have, I mean, look, this is the major source of the culture war to begin with, even before the social media stuff and before the woke lecturing. The major source is that the government is so powerful that you have to fight for your side to be in control of it. Otherwise, you're ruled over by the side who you hate. And this is, unless the only way forward that would solve this problem, that would defuse the culture war, is accepting some type of libertarianism. And what I just mean by that is just whatever exactly it is, something that says, okay, listen, you have these cultural views in Portland and you have these cultural views in Alabama. You're not going to remake each other. You guys can live the way you want to live, and you guys can live the way you want to live, and you can peacefully coexist. The idea that you have to have this $5-6 trillion a year beast that's controlled by one side or another that hate each other is just going to keep this thing going and getting hotter and hotter.
Yeah, and then you have these ideological positions that these huge corporations attach themselves to siphon money off of.
Right.
You know, there's Evan Hafer. He's owner of Black Rifle Coffee, and he was on, and he was, he's a veteran, and now runs this huge coffee business, and was discussing what he thinks is really going on with Afghanistan. He's like, there's no reason for us to be over there. He goes, I think they're over there to suck money out of taxpayers, and that's what they're doing. And when Trump was interviewing, or rather Steve Hilton was interviewing Trump, I've known Steve Hilton for a long time.
That's the Next Revolution.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've met
Yeah.
him. He's a good dude.
He's a very nice guy. I was friends with him long before he was ever at Fox News. I met him in Maui.
Oh yeah.
On the beach. His kids were playing with my kids when they were real little, and we became friends. And we've gone on vacations together. Like I know him very well.
Oh, that's cool. By the way, I know the exact interview that you're talking about. I think
Yeah.
it was one of the craziest things I've ever seen.
When he's talking about the military-industrial complex. He's like, well, we got to people, they want to go to war. Military-industrial complex, it's real. Eisenhower warned us about it.
This is the thing. By the way, that moment, this is why the establishment hates Donald Trump so much.
Yeah.
Because he is uncontrollable, and he might just blurt out, sitting down outside the White House with Steve Hilton, that, oh, you know what? There's a whole bunch of people around me who want to go to war because it makes them billions of dollars.
Billions.
And this is like, and this is just the president, the commander-in-chief saying it. Now, on the other side, Trump didn't end any of these wars. He kept talking about doing it, and then he'd always back out at the last minute.
Why do you think that is?
Well, you know, I don't know exactly, but I know that whenever he would make a move to try to end one of these wars, the press would go nuts circling him. I mean, they always were, but they'd dial it up to like 11. And then he'd have people within his administration undermining him at every turn. Yeah. At every turn. I remember back, I was a contributor on a SE Cup show. She's got a show on CNN. I was a contributor there for like a year. And there was one time where it was Donald Trump came out and said that we're getting out of Syria. And he goes, look, our only goal in Syria is to defeat ISIS. That's all we care about. And they're almost defeated. As soon as they're defeated, we're getting out completely out of Syria. And then about a week later, McMaster's put out this statement where he was saying, these are our goals in Syria. And one of them was regime change to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. And then he gets fired like a week after that. And their take at CNN was kind of like, well, isn't this great that at least one of the adults in the room is like, no, Donald Trump, this is what we're doing in Syria. We're having another regime change. And I was like losing my shit. Like, wait, hold on. However you feel about this, he's the commander-in-chief. The Secretary of State doesn't get to decide, no, we're fighting a war.
Here it is.
Oh, this is the Steve Hilton one, yeah.
Hold on. Damn it. Oh, I have the YouTube thing muted.
He was particularly orange that day.
They want to keep, you have people here in Washington, they never want to leave. I said, you know what I'll do? I'll leave a couple of hundred soldiers behind. But if it was up to them, they'd bring thousands of soldiers in. Someday people will explain it.
Well, this is an example.
You do have a group, and they call it the military-industrial complex. They never want to leave. They always want to fight. No, I don't want to fight. But you do have situations like Iran. You can't let them have nuclear weapons. You just can't let that happen.
A friend of mine today was talking about The Art of the Deal. I've never read The Art of the Deal, but he was in rehab. When he was in rehab, he had a lot of time, and he read The Art of the Deal. And he's like, it's remarkably progressive, even by today's standards. He's like, he wrote this in like the 80s.
Well, Donald Trump was never that, I mean...
He's got flaws.
Oh, no question.
But the problem is they overwhelm anything good about him. Where like you get these flaws, like the bragging and the craziness and the not telling the truth about things and
the tricky thing with Trump is that if it wasn't for these character flaws or these qualities that are partly, have these character flaws, he'd never be the president.
Right.
But then once he becomes president, you're like, man, I wish you could just plug up these couple holes and keep saying shit like that.
Right.
Because that would be really awesome. Like,
Yeah.
we really do need a guy who's taking on the military-industrial complex and pushing to end these wars and exposing a lot of the corruption. But also the other problem is that this was never really what animated Trump. But the problem is that with Donald Trump, I think that a lot of the Trump haters project this thing onto Donald Trump like he's literally Hitler. A lot of the Trump lovers project this thing onto him like he's our savior.
Yeah.
But the reality is it's just what you see.
Yeah.
He's just that. He's the guy who he's as shallow a thinker as he seems. He's instinctually brilliant, but intellectually, he really just cares about being the best. I won. I was terrific. Everybody knows it. And so I think
that's served him well his whole life.
Sure has.
The idea that
Yeah.
all of a sudden he becomes president, he's going to abandon that and become presidential.
No, it's not going to happen. But anyone who was a decent gentleman or like didn't have those qualities would never have gotten to where he was. He got to where he was because he was willing to say, like, he got to where he was in large part because he had a quality that Bernie Sanders didn't have about him. Bernie Sanders is entirely too nice of a guy to lead a revolution. He would always say, we're leading a revolution. And then you'd have Joe Biden, who's the epitome of the system that you want to revolt against. And he'd go, look, Joe's a very decent guy. He's my friend. I'm not going to say anything bad about him. And you're like, well, you're probably not going to lead a fucking revolution if you're not willing to lob some insults. Like, I'm not saying you have to lob bullets, but like, you got to at least.
Do you though? Do you?
Well, you have to at
do
least
that?
attack. You have to at least attack what he stands
But
for. I'm not saying you have to call him a fat loser. I'm saying you have to go like, you have to go, listen, you are the epitome of Washington corruption. You've enriched your own family while you're getting other people killed, while you're selling out the country. Yes, I think you have to go for the jugular if you're actually going to beat this system.
Isn't it strange though that you have to do that? You can't just espouse the merits of your own ideas.
Well,
you have to attack.
But, you know, if you're a real human being, right? Like, let's say what Donald Trump was just saying. And by the way, Bernie Sanders pretty much agrees with him on that. He's talked about how war is big business and how we were lied into the war in Iraq, and he voted. Bernie Sanders, to his credit, he was one of the very few Democrats in the Senate who voted against the war in Iraq at the time. Mm-hmm. Very few Democrats in the Senate actually stood their ground, and good for him for doing that. But you're talking about people lying to get real human beings slaughtered that to make people money. I mean, if you talk about that and you don't have some type of outrage about it, that just doesn't seem to make sense to me. Like, that's not how a real human being should feel.
No, I totally understand, but I wonder if, like, in the middle of that, when you're insulting people, you're perpetuating, you're keeping going this this sort of system that's been in place for so long, where you talk about your merits, you shit on the flaws of your opponent. He does the same to you. Whoever lands the most blows wins. I mean, this is highlighted by the way Kamala Harris is like sort of talked about her debate with Biden, right? When she was on Colbert, she's like, it was a debate. It was a debate. But it's like, that's the only way to do it? Is the only way to do it to shit on the other person?
I think that you have to, like, I think there's nothing wrong with really running on your ideas. And I think that part Bernie Sanders did, you know? And I don't like a lot of Bernie Sanders' ideas. I think he's got some that are really good.
Which ones do you like?
Well, okay, what I love about Bernie Sanders is that he voted against the war in Iraq, as I just said. He was great in the Senate about the war in Yemen and trying to bring that to an end, which is just this god-awful nightmare that's still going on, that Obama started and Trump continued. I mean, what's happening in Yemen is like one of the biggest tragedies in my lifetime.
Explain it to people.
So Yemen is the poorest country in the Middle East, which is saying something. You know, they were already the poorest country in the Middle East before any of this happened. And the Saudis basically went to war with the Houthis in Yemen. And America backed the Saudis under Barack Obama. What Obama administration said to placate the Saudis. Basically, the Saudis were pissed off about a lot of things, and they're a big business partner with us. And so they were pissed off about the war in Iraq. The Saudis didn't want the war in Iraq. They kind of foresaw what would happen, that it would give Iran control of the region, and it would be a nightmare. But the Cheneyites really wanted the war in Iraq. Israel really wanted the war in Iraq, and the neocons won, and they got the war. And so they were already pissed off about that. And then they were really pissed off that Obama made the Iran deal with Iran. And so to placate, which I believe was the direct quote, to placate the Saudis, Obama decided to back them in this war against Yemen. And they put a full blockade around the country, which was already the poorest country in the Middle East. And this led to just I mean, the UN said it was the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. This was before COVID, but I think it's still probably up there. There were well over 1 million cases of cholera, which is basically, I mean, curable with, I think, liquids. Like, I think Gatorade could solve cholera. I don't know. You might need antibiotics or something like that. But it was children and old people just dying in massive numbers. I still don't think they know the exact numbers. It's going to be somewhere on the scale of what the war in Iraq was. Hundreds of thousands of people dead. And Bernie Sanders really led the effort to try to end it in the Senate. And he did a great job on that. Like, phenomenal. He also has a great bill proposed to decriminalize marijuana on a federal level, which I think would be phenomenal. And so there were several things, like those would probably be the ones I'd pick that I thought were really great about Bernie Sanders. So I think running on issues, probably one of my big criticisms of him is that he doesn't really lead with those issues. Like those aren't the things he talked about a lot on the campaign trail, but he was excellent on all of those. So I think he could run on his principles, you know, but I think you have to at some point have a little bit of a killer instinct to become the alpha monkey, to become the leader of this country. And I thought that Bernie Sanders could have won the whole election with the tone that he started in the primary, and he didn't. And I think that Bernie Sanders, like, look, the corporate press completely came down to try to ruin it for him. Who knows what the DNC did this time? I mean, it was exposed in 2016. Who knows what they were doing behind the scenes?
Well, we know what they were doing. We know that was the reason why Klobuchar and Buttigieg dropped out.
Well, that we know.
We know that Warren stayed in to siphon votes off of Bernie.
No
and
question.
We know they gave their delegates over to Biden.
No question. We know that much. We know that right now. We don't know exactly who made the phone calls. I think there was reporting that Barack Obama had called a couple of them. To
that sounds good.
Yeah, it sure does. But you're right. So all the competition with Biden drops out right before Super Tuesday. Bernie Sanders' competition, Elizabeth Warren, stays in till the bitter end.
I think they felt like with Bernie, even though there's talk that they couldn't control him, right? There's also talk that he couldn't win because there's certain key states that he's never going to win. Because even though that message resonated with a lot of people, including me, what resonated with me is, first of all, absolving people of student debt. I know a lot of people that are wrapped up in student debt, and I think it's one of the best examples of, first of all, you have essentially children, right? You have someone who's 17, 18 years old, they're going into school, and they're taking on enormous debt. And they don't, I think you could make the real argument that they don't have the intellectual capacity to understand the ramifications of this. Maybe some do, maybe some don't. But when you're talking about people that are in debt hundreds of thousands of dollars by the time they get out of school, and then they get out of school and they get a job that pays $40,000 a year, do the math. How long before you catch up? You never catch up. There's people to this day that are getting Social Security, that are getting their Social Security docked because they owe money for student loans. I mean, you're at the end of the fucking game.
Is that true? Are people
they're
old enough for Social Security?
Oh,
And
yeah.
they had student loan debts like that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, that's going on right now. Make sure that's true, Jamie. I'm pretty sure. Sounds really good what I'm saying. Pretty sure it's true.
Well, that is, and they are
but
victims of a corrupt scheme,
yes,
for sure.
It's a bad system. And I think if we have all this money to go to Afghanistan and put on these endless wars, the idea that we don't have enough money to provide a reasonably priced education. I'm not saying it should be free. Maybe it should cost a little bit because I think people work harder when they have to work for something. But the idea that you should be hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt by the time you get out, and the reality of the economy is that even before COVID, if you got out, the odds of you getting a job that's like going to be able to even put a dent in that debt in your chosen field, they're not that good.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
So
no question about
here
all
it
of
is.
that.
19% of your Social Security payments can be garnished to repay a student loan debt. Your monthly benefit cannot sink below $700. Well,
Okay.
Good luck living on $750 a month.
And this is also for people who are, like 35 now when they retire? Like,
Yeah.
what's that going to be
So,
worth?
I mean, that's not that long ago, man. If you think about someone who's 65, right? So no, look at this. Are student loans forgiven after 65? There are no student loan forgiveness programs specifically for senior citizens. Elderly student loan borrowers are eligible for the same loan forgiveness programs as other borrowers. Well, that's crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy if you're that old and you're on a fixed income and you really can't physically work anymore. And we don't, if we're a community, all right, and this is one of the things I think about the United States, the idea of a country. We're supposed to be a community. Even though we're broken off into these countries and they're broken off in these cities and we're broken off by ideologies and we're separated by all these different lines in the sands that we draw. At the end of the day, we're all contributing to this pool. We're putting our tax dollars in and we're deciding what's important and what's not. For me, student loan forgiveness was a big thing because I was like, we've got to stop this cycle of fucking people over economically when they're 18 years old. It doesn't make any sense.
Fair enough. But I just think that I agree with the spirit of everything you're saying. And I think when I said it's a corrupt system, it's just that the fact that you have all of these parties involved where you have like the government who's guaranteeing all of these student loans. And then you have, for a while, I think now it's all done straight from the federal government. For a while, you had these financial companies that are giving out the loans and then taking in the interest and profiting off of them.
Yeah.
And then you have these universities who are able to raise their tuition over and over. And there's always a market for it because the loans are guaranteed by the government. So so now you have all of these people just raking in money, and the politicians get to brag about all these kids going to college. And then who's fucked is the 17, 18-year-old who was told their whole life that, oh, just take the loan out, whatever you got to do, because this will lead you to a better life. And then the jobs aren't there for them. But the problem, if you want to break this cycle, the problem is the government guaranteeing the loans to begin with.
Right.
Because
it's
this is what
subsidized.
it's subsidized. This is why college inflates faster than almost any other price in the market. And so I would just think, even if we are going to forgive the loans that are out there now, what you need to do is stop the loans, cut them off, and let the prices of college come back to something that's more reasonable, like they were in like our parents' generation, where you could work a summer job and pay off your college.
And then you've also got a very interesting situation in college where most professors are left-leaning.
And most of the shit you're learning is useless. I mean, not all of it,
Yeah.
but a whole lot of it.
Well, I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but some of it's going to be useless. But let's not concentrate on that, because you're supposed to be expanding your horizons, and there's social growth, being outside of your family for the first time. There's all sorts of.
But you can do that in lots of ways than spending $100,000 to go get drunk at a frat party. You know,
can,
like
but how many of those ways ensure intellectual competition? How many of those ways ensure that you're going to get together with other students and you're going to debate things, you're going to discuss issues, you're going to learn things, you're going to talk amongst yourselves, you're going to also all be forced to take these rigorous courses that demand a lot of you intellectually? That it's very rare.
I like that in theory. I just don't know how much that's happening in universities. But I get your point.
But let's agree it's the only place where it's happening.
Sure.
For 18-year-olds. Trust me, because I barely spend any time in college. My time in college was 3 years at UMass Boston and barely paying attention, right? So these people that are teaching these kids overwhelmingly lean left. Now, I'm not saying that they shouldn't lean left. If this is how you feel, you should express yourself. But it is really odd in a country that thrives on this concept of diversity, that there's almost no diversity in the intellectual ideologies that these professors have.
Yeah.
Like, what are the numbers of professors in this country? What percentage of professors identify as Marxists? Let's take a guess. I'm going to say it's in the 20s.
Yeah, I probably guess something like that. But then there's also identifying as Marxist, and then there's like being influenced by, say, like postmodernism.
Yeah,
or something
but
like
we're
that.
going as far as we can. This is
Marxist.
That's as far left as we can get. Right?
Yeah, it might be under 20%. I'm not sure.
But we can agree that it's a really far left stance to say you're a Marxist.
Sure. Yeah, that's pretty far.
Pretty far left. So, but I'm saying, like, what percentage identifies the hardest of hard lefts?
Very close.
What is it?
There's an article that says about 18% of social scientists in the U.S. self-identify as Marxists.
Oh, but that's social scientists.
I know. I typed in
Does
professors. It says professors in the top. But
yeah,
that's
because
what
if
the
you're
thing
talking
says.
about professors in like other,
professors,
harder
but-
sciences.
Yeah.
It says that down there.
80% of social scientists. Okay.
But that's still an interesting.
That's a large number, and that's a
Yes.
large number of people that are teaching, like, critical race theory and gender theory, and there's a lot of.
This is right. So this is where all the woke shit comes from.
Right.
And this is really destructive.
Well, this is where your kids go. Only about 5% who identify as conservative. Isn't that seems crazy?
You've got 18% Marxist, 5% conservative.
An AEI panel discussion, was that?
Yeah, that's what I was going to see
okay.
what that is. I was going to see like
Titled
like
Clo-
15 people they asked.
The Closed-Minded Campus, the Stifling of Ideas in American Universities. But it's one of those things where it's like, what is most appealing to young kids? Compassion. What happens to people when they get older? Realism. What happens to people when they get older and then they're worried about their physical health? And then conservatism.
Right.
I mean, it's like, that's one of the reasons why conservatism, and even in, you libertarianism, when you think about it, when you do this sort of like real narrow-minded view of what that means to people, for a lot of people it means cruelty. It means a lack of compassion. It means this like blind faith in capitalism and competition. And that's one of the things that freaks out young people, because young people, as they, enter into the world and they start learning things and they leave their parents, a lot of times, first of all, they feel suppressed by their parents. They feel like the parents, who probably work really hard in order to get them to go to school, to be able to afford their school, will probably work really hard in order just to keep the family together, just in terms of the amount of money you have to have a house and 2 cars and live in America and pay your taxes and send your kids to college. Like, goddamn, you got to work.
Yeah.
You fucking have to work. And so if you're a kid and you're just living off your parents, and then you're hearing all this like hardcore shit, like your parents they want you to be successful. You're like, Jesus Christ, leave me alone. And then you get to school and you drop acid and you learn about Marxism and you learn about socialism, and you're like, we can all just get together. We can just pool all our money together and we're going to be fine. And there was a discussion. Who was it that was it on this show? I think it was. I was talking to somebody, and they were talking about the early days of the United States. And then the early days of the United States with wheat production. The initial ideas were that they were going to pool all the food together.
I think this was actually pre-United States. I think this was in the colonies, right?
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you're right. And then they
Everyone was
realized
starving
really, really quickly that this didn't work. And they go, okay, scrap that. What you grow, you eat.
Yep.
And they're like, oh shit, I gotta go to work.
Yeah.
And then people started busting their ass. There's a diffusion of responsibility that comes from this idea that you are an individual and that the government should provide for you. There's so many people in this country and there's so much money. Look at all the trillions they spend on military. Look at all the trillions they spend on infrastructure. Look at all the trillions they give to the fossil fuel industry and all this. They start running all these numbers and they go, why can't the government take care of everybody? Why?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, and that is one of the, my position is basically that the government shouldn't do any of this shit, and we don't have the money for any of it,
Right.
and we shouldn't rob it from people. But it is a strong argument from like an AOC type,
Yes.
where they'll be like, oh, well, we don't have this money, and she can go, yeah, but every time you right-wingers want a war, you always find the money for it.
Where I was going. So you have young people who do have these idealistic perspectives like AOC, and then they go through the university system and they're taught this by people who don't enter the real world.
Yes.
Right? These people, they stay in academia. They learn, they grow, they become professors, they get tenure. They're there, and this is their world. And in their world, they get to shape young minds, and they shape young minds who are already open to these ideas of compassion and of being different than their fucking parents who are so hardcore. Your parents had to feed you, you fucks. Your parents are out there grinding.
A little bit of gratitude.
It's
would probably be good.
fucking hard. It's hard to get by.
Yeah.
It's hard.
No, so I completely get what you're saying. But the other thing about, which I guess just concerns me a little bit about abolishing, student debt or forgiving student debt is that, well, number one, the first thing I said is that it's like, well, okay, if we don't get the system fixed, then we're going to forgive this debt and then keep perpetuating more people in debt. So something still needs to be done there. But the problem is also that, like, when you say forgive debt, or you have the taxpayer pick any of this stuff up, it's just coming from other people. It's you're taxing working people to pay for this.
But
and
why?
There's something.
But why does it have to be that way? The government already subsidizes it, right?
Right.
So what if they didn't do that? What if there was a way to figure out like a reasonable solution to how professors are paid, how students pay for their education? What if there's a reasonable solution that was profitable?
I'd be all for that if there was a
Is that
reasonable
feasible?
solution. I think so, but I think basically the solution is to just get the government out of the business of higher education. If there are institutions of higher education that are providing enough value for people, like you come here, you're going to be way better in life in that scene, then people are going to want to send their kids there.
Okay.
Let them survive on their own.
But what about Canada? What about the UK? What about places that pay for education?
Yeah, I mean, there are like other countries that do that, and okay, fair enough. Like that, I don't know enough about the Canadian university system, but I'll tell you this: they have just as big a problem with what you were talking about before with the woke shit. Maybe even more.
Maybe even more. Well, their president's woke.
Yeah,
he's not a president; he's a king, right? What is he?
I believe he's a prime minister.
No, he's a king.
I might. You know what, Jamie? Is Trudeau a king?
King Brownface. He's a king. Thank you.
I also think that the woke shit is really it's really something that has really gripped the country in an interesting way over and it's not just that the colleges are like teaching it. Like that's almost like the center of it all, like critical race theory in some university.
Yeah.
But then you see how much it's been jumped onto by all the big corporations, politicians. They're all behind.
Well, that's
the
why
woke
Kamala
shit.
Harris states her gender pronouns.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's in compliance.
Do you wonder
She's
what
capitulating to the woke culture.
Right. But it's interesting. Like, I wonder oftentimes, and I guess I don't know how many of like real woke true believers will ever listen to anything that I'm ever on. Like, even as big as this show is, like, they would just be furious by everything you say. The way you just drank your glass is like, that's white supremacy or whatever, like that.
Yeah. Well, me by my very existence.
Yes.
I'm a white male rich guy with tattoos who does cage fighting commentary.
Yes, very problematic.
A lot of problems.
Very problematic. But do you ever wonder, like, even from their perspective, which is hard to get into, but if you're like out there and you're like, okay, Black Lives Matter and like the hardcore like woke 20-year-old,
right?
Like, and they're like, I'm against this system because this system is white supremacy, right? And then you realize that all of Hollywood agrees with you. And all of academia agrees with you. And like JP Morgan Chase is running like a Black Lives Matter ads. And Kamala Harris, the vice president-elect, agrees with you and all. And you go, how against the system are you really if the entire system is supporting what you're doing? And why, if the whole system is based on white supremacy and you're here to call that out, why would the system not be reacting to crush you? Why would they be like propping you up?
Well, the system is so malleable, right? The system recognizes trends and go, we can profit off this trend.
Well,
we need to sell Black Lives Matter masks.
But I think it's more than just profiting off of it. Like my theory on it is that this is the ultimate divide and conquer and protect yourself strategy. So you see how much they don't want true economic leftism. That's what Bernie Sanders represented. And you saw how much the corporate press freaked out when it looked like he might have a shot at winning. They were calling his supporters Nazis and shit like that. Like, they were giving him the Trump treatment. The Jewish guy who's the closest to ever being president any Jew's ever been is all of a sudden represents a Nazi takeover. Yeah. But they freaked out, and all the stuff you were saying about having the other candidates drop out, and that Bernie Sanders was unacceptable to them. They don't like that brand of left-wing ideology. They love the woke shit. Because the woke shit allows them to give up nothing. But like JP Morgan Chase is like, fine, we'll send our white execs to diversity training. Good deal. Now, are we cool with the left now? Like, that's fine. We'll hang a Black Lives Matter flag up. No problem. They're fine with gestures. But Bernie Sanders is like, I want your money. I want your shit. I want your profits. No more making like Bernie Sanders is if some like social justice warrior is like, we have a problem with microaggressions and toxic masculinity. The JP Morgan Chase is like, no problem. That's great. And Bernie Sanders is like, there shouldn't be billionaires. And they're like, ugh. All right, I don't know about that guy. That guy seems like he could be trouble. You know what I mean? So they don't like the economic populist stuff because they've got a nice little system worked out here where they're raping the country. The fucking big bank system that they have worked out right now is that the Federal Reserve prints money out of thin air, lends it to them at 0% interest, and they lend it out to the rest of us at interest. So they just get money for free and then lend it out and collect the interest. It's a sweet-ass fucking deal. If I were them, I'd want to talk about microaggressions, too. I'd be like, you know what the real problem in our society is? These fucking microaggressions, am I right? That's what's fucking everybody over. White supremacy.
They consciously, like, recognize these trends and say, we got to get on board with this, and this will help us because we'll be one of the good guys. We'll be a company that's very difficult to criticize.
I think there's a lot of forces at work, but I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah,
I think they also realize that, like, I think there are people, it's like this kind of, it's like an alliance between the top and the bottom. So there's like the 20-year-old who works for some company.
Yeah.
Maybe some internet music streaming company. I don't know, some company out there, some 20-year-old woke person who is a true believer.
Yeah.
A true believer in the woke stuff.
Yeah.
And then there is the J.P. Morgan Chase, Kamala Harris's of the world. They don't believe this for a goddamn second. It's just a ploy. It's just a tactic.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of playing off of these people. But my thing is that, like, to the bleeding heart, young, woke social justice warrior types is like, look, there's a need for you in society. There's a need for, like, a compassionate left who's willing to protest shit and shut shit down. But you're focused on all the wrong areas. It's not about forget microaggressions. Think about real aggressions. We're still in all the longest wars in American history. But protest that. Get out in the streets about fucking Yemen. Try to end that war.
Isn't that it almost, but there's too many things going on. And then those things are out of sight. They're in another place that you're never going to visit.
Well, you have to think a little bit about it. But why is it that, and maybe it's, I don't like have an answer. This isn't like a leading question. Like, but why is it that, like, the Vietnam War could draw so many protests? The war in Iraq under George W. Bush drew so many protests. So, like, why were Trump's wars never like a thing?
I think the press covers them differently today than they did during the Vietnam era.
Yeah, I think that's true.
I think the press during the Vietnam era was very much the ideal view of the press.
Probably closer.
Much.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's been changed. First of all, there's a bunch of factors that happen almost together. They coincide. One of them is the advent of social media and the internet in general, and then how people are no longer digesting their news through paper. They're not paying for a newspaper. They're getting it on their phone. And you're now in competition with BuzzFeed and Vice and name it. There's so many choices. There's Vox and there's almost too many different The Blaze is fucking. You can keep going and going and going. There's too many different places where you can go to get information. So if a website is competing with the New York Times now has to do something in order to get your attention. So what do? They do at least if they don't do clickbaity stuff, they do provocative things. They gear their attention towards things they know are going to get clicks because they're starving. They're literally fighting for survival, whether it's the Washington Post or even the Wall Street Journal. I think a lot of these newspapers are experiencing significant. Well, one thing that led to a big increase in the New York Post subscribers, ironically, is Trump.
Right.
Trump shitting on them and calling them the failing New York Times. People,
yes.
Trump calling them the failing New York Times. They started their subscriptions went up.
Well, this is true all over the place with corporate media entities that were dying. I mean, it's also true for MSNBC and CNN, and a lot of them all saw rating surges.
Sure,
under
because
Trump.
people wanted to combat Trump. Yeah, a lot of them. It became the number one focus because if it bleeds, it leads. Like these are the really exciting things that people are going to tune into, and it's going to help our revenue stream. So our idea is that the reason why they're showing us the news is these are the most significant stories. They're going to impact your life the most. This is what's most important. Not really the case. What it really is what's going to get the most attention. What's the most important in terms of like what's going to get the most views, which is going to bring in the most advertising revenue. And for people online that are writing stories, they don't call it clickbait for a reason. Yeah, or they do rather call it clickbait for a reason. The reason is they got to trick you into clicking that thing because that's how they make their money. That we've created this so then they've tried subscription models, and I subscribe to the Times and I subscribe to the Washington Post. I subscribe to like 4 or 5 different publications, and I felt like an obligation to do that. I'm getting my news from them. I feel like I should give them some money, and that might be the only way these things ever survive is that people get their news via subscription model. But to this day, someone will send me a link and I'll click the link and they'll say to subscribe. I'm like, oh, fuck you. And then I won't read it. And then I'll Google it. I'll try to find it somewhere else.
Yeah, that works about 50% of the time.
Yeah.
Just Google the title.
You should be able to just pay for an article. Like maybe Apple pay you 5 cents for this article. Let me get a double click. Like, but to make me subscribe every time I understand that there's journalists and they're doing amazing work and that they've worked for weeks on this expose and this has been the sole focus of their life and it's valuable. And it's valuable to me. It's valuable to the United States as a whole because this one person's intellectual perspective on a very complex subject, and they've boiled this down for weeks and weeks. Here, this is what we've learned about X. Those are important.
Sure.
I'll give you a couple bucks. But make it fucking easy. Yeah. Don't make me subscribe and give you my email address, and I gotta Just make me go, doo, doo. Let me go like that. I'll give you $2.
Yeah, it's kind of, as you say, it's surprising they haven't figured that all out.
Close what Apple has, but it's not quite. It's
Right.
It's like in between what you're talking
I
about.
have that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have that.
But it's still there's somebody curating it.
Yes.
Which is a little that's a little strange.
Exactly. I mean, I would like to be able to go to each individual front page and
I think
but I barely have time for that.
I think the thing you were mentioning earlier about who you trust is like a bigger factor than ever before.
You know
like,
who I trust?
Who?
Online people. People
yeah,
would
me
know
too.
people like Jimmy Dore, people like Kyle Kalinske.
Love Jimmy Dore.
Yeah, people like The Hill, like
Dude, if you-
Crystal and Sagar.
I like them too. I like that their show is great.
It's great.
But so it's like, and by the way, and the best is like Glenn Greenwald, who we
Yes,
just had on recently.
yes.
Like he's on, and you know where he stands.
100%.
Like he's a left wing guy, okay, but
Yeah.
he still has journalistic integrity.
100%.
So he's not just gonna like, that him walking away from the Intercept was incredible.
Yeah.
And and Jeremy Scahill, the other guy who was at the Intercept with him, is a great journalist. Aaron Mate, I might be fucking up his last name. Have you had him on?
No.
He's great. He writes for The Nation. Did a great job. He's on Jimmy Dore's show all the time. He did a great job of like just blowing up the Russia conspiracy bullshit. And it was more powerful because it's like a left-winger doing it who's like, listen, this is all lies. And like, I hate Donald Trump, but I'm not going to tell you something that isn't real is real just because I hate him. And so if you're smart or if you're fortunate enough to find the right people, you can get really good information online. But it comes down to like who you trust to give you the right information.
Right.
And there's a lot of people right now who it's kind of like, well, these are the few people I trust. These are the few people I trust on both sides.
Right, and you could be way off. Like you could think you trust this person, someone would come along and go, "Hey, man, do you know they're financed by this? Do you know that this is a part of the reason why they keep bringing this up? Is there's a directive?
Yeah.
You know that emails have been leaked and that it's been proven that these people are supposed to be doing what they're doing." You're like, "Oh, fuck, really?"
That's the worst. Figuring out someone you trust isn't right. You're like,
God,
shit.
it's like finding out the cult master really doesn't speak to the alien behind the comet. Yeah, but this is where we're at, right? We're in this imperfect system that's the best system the world's ever known. That's what's weird. What's weird is, as good as this, like, it's hard to say things are great because things are not great for everybody, and they're certainly not as good as they could be, right? So that said, we have to recognize that this system of this experiment in self-government is the best system that's ever been put in place as far as creativity, artistic contribution, the impact on culture, innovation. Like, there's some beautiful things that are happening all around the world.
Yeah.
But there's some wild shit that has happened in America over a period of just 200 years.
Yeah.
It's pretty fucking crazy.
No, it's the greatest country that's ever existed by many different metrics.
So let me throw this out.
And it's worth saving because we're on a fucking suicide mission.
Yes.
So it's worth saving.
I don't believe this, but I'm just as a thought exercise. What if all this robbery, like student debt, and even the military-industrial complex, and even what if all of this activity has to go on in order to have this much thriving, in order to have this much economic prosperity and this much freedom? You got to have fuckery. You got to have madness. You got to have lies. You got to have deception. You got to have special interest groups. You got to have people distorting other people's positions on things. You got to have empty pundits. You got to have puppets in various stages of media. You have to have clickbait. You have to have all these things. Because if you don't have all these things, you don't have resistance. You don't have an enemy. You don't have a battle. You don't have a competition to get these prominent ideas that you think are the most crucial in order to maintain this society and maybe even improve it. They don't compete enough. They have to be suppressed. You have to choke people. You got to grab them. You got to shake them like bad babies. Almost like you have to create this chaos. It's almost like you have to create it in order for people to battle this chaos.
Well, I guess there is like a yin and yang to the fact that without corruption, there could never be like noble anti-corruption forces, and without anything to fight against.
I don't believe there are any bad babies, and you definitely shouldn't shake them. That was a bad analogy.
That was a bad analogy, but if you're gonna shake babies, make sure it's a bad baby.
Like a Hitler baby.
Yeah. Hitler baby, I think it's okay to shake.
When do you think you could go back in time and be justified in killing Hitler? Like, if you killed him when he was 10, you'd be an asshole.
Yeah, that's bad.
Maybe you should just coach him.
Yeah.
Teach him.
Anytime. Yeah, well, once you have the ability to time travel, you'd think you could
Right.
probably solve this in a better way than killing them.
Could you, though?
Maybe not. I don't know.
You have to keep him from steroids and cocaine, right? Because apparently that was the thing. They would inject him with testosterone and cocaine.
You ever see that video of him at the Olympics where
Yes.
he's like tweaking out?
Yes.
He's like fucking.
It's amazing.
You're like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's
Can you imagine what it's
amazing.
like being in his inner circle? Or just like a little thing fucked up or something like that?
There's a crazy story. I forget who told it to me. I do too many podcasts, but about Mussolini, and that Mussolini was ready to get out of the war. It's like, Italy doesn't want no part of this. and they shot Hitler up with coke and testosterone, and they sent him over there, and he cornered Mussolini and fucking talked to him for hours. Imagine being at a party with some guy who's just spitting in your face, telling you stories.
And he's talking
on
just
coke.
like his public speeches,
Yes.
like just like going crazy.
And by the end of the fucking conversation, Mussolini is all in. He's like, anything just to get this man away from me. Oh.
But was it that, or was Mussolini like actually like, fuck yeah, we're gonna fight this
Right.
war? Like Hitler
Maybe-
just had this power.
He had a needle and a fucking mirror. He's like, come on, do a storm of this. I'm gonna fucking hit you with one of those. Woo! Are we in? But, Hitler was doing all sorts of hardcore amphetamines. By the way, so was Kennedy. Did you know that? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The Dr. Feelgood, they were
Yeah.
doing that to a lot of people back then. I mean,
I'm pretty convinced all of them are on some type of drugs. See Joe Biden sprinting out to his acceptance
Oh,
speech the other day. They
yeah.
gave him a little something.
100%.
Donald Trump did.
Trump.
Dude, Donald Trump did in back-to-back days in the last week before the election 5 events at 5 different states where he did close to an hour at each one.
Yeah.
Like that'd be if
Amazing.
someone told you, dude, we're getting on a plane, you're doing 5 hours tonight in 5 different states, you'd be like, that's going to be a day, man.
That's a
Donald
day.
Trump is in his mid-70s. He's overweight and he had COVID couple weeks ago and he's fucking doing it, and dude, he loves it.
Yeah.
Like he's just up there and like in the chest, we love you, and by the way, nothing scripted,
Right.
which is the most amazing part about Trump. He literally just gets up there and just fucking stream of conscious.
They got a doctor with a turkey baster filled
Oh.
with testosterone.
Oh, my
And
God.
they're just shoving it into him.
They're giving him something.
Everything. They're
It's
giving
not
him
just
everything.
Big Macs.
No,
There's
no,
something
no,
else at
no,
work there.
For sure. There's definitely some sort of stimulant, probably prescribed by a doctor, so it doesn't seem like it's bad.
Yeah.
I would never do drugs. There's a lot of people that think that. I knew a lady who was like hooked on Xanax, but she hated drugs. I'm like, what do you think you're doing?
Yeah.
What do you think you're doing?
People have weird ideas about drugs.
All right, and if you talk to like drug specialists, I've had people on that explain that kicking Xanax is actually more difficult than kicking opiates. Like Xanax addiction is very serious.
Yeah. It's a powerful drug.
Yeah, maybe not more difficult, but it's in the realm. It's like it's an incredibly difficult thing to kick and has all sorts of weird complications with people. Antidepressants in general or anti-anxiety medication in general, like benzodiazepine. That's that shit that Jordan Peterson was trying to get off. And he was wrecked for a fucking year. He's just coming out of the fog now. I mean, had to go do a medical detox in Russia
Yeah.
for benzos.
Yeah.
Have you ever done a benzo? Do you know what
No.
that is? I don't know what it's like.
I've heard the
Joey
stories
Diaz
about
eats
Peterson.
them. Joey Diaz eats them in a bowl like cornflakes.
Yeah, but Joey Diaz isn't exactly
I
human.
don't think he's ever had them.
He can,
might have.
You couldn't do anything to Joey Diaz, no matter what you give him. He'll be the same.
Well, while he's alive, he's a national treasure. We should protect him with everything we can.
right.
You've got him now.
That's right.
Yeah, he's in
out
Jersey.
by us. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. I'm happy. That was win one for the East
And
Coast.
right when he got there, they legalized weed. Coincidence? Maybe not.
It's quite a coincidence if it is just that. He brought it. He brought the energy.
They probably thought about it. And like Uncle Joey's in town, we got to check that box.
I'm glad Joey Diaz is in New Jersey, and I'm glad Jordan Peterson is home. I think
Yeah.
the country could use some more Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, for sure. And also, I think it's probably real important for a guy of his intellectual capacity to explain what it was like to be addicted to these things and try to get off of them. And I think a lot of us, especially it'd be easy for someone like me who's never been physically addicted to something where I had like some serious withdrawals. It's probably easy to dismiss that as mental weakness, but when a guy who's as intelligent as him and has spent so much time talking about personal responsibility has a situation like this, it can shine some light in a very unique way that maybe like you or I, who have you ever been addicted to anything?
Not really.
Coffee. I was addicted to,
but I really am addicted to coffee. You
Yeah.
ever like not been able to have coffee for
Yeah,
like
I've had
a
some
morning?
headaches. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I had to give blood, or I had to get blood tests once, like a couple years ago, and it was like you can't drink coffee before it, and it was like at noon, and it was like by the time I was out, I was like, holy shit, like
Yeah.
I'm really feeling that. But no, not addiction to like anything like
You can
crazy.
get headaches. I bought a 51-ounce French press. It's like it's a big old metal French press, and when I make coffee, if I make French press coffee, I put in way too much coffee. Like, you're not supposed to have that much grinds. I'm basically making speed, and then, and then I poured the hot water and I drank the whole thing. So I drank 50 ounces, whatever it is, without the beans. Like I make it like a couple inches thick on the bottom.
Right.
It's way more coffee than you're supposed to have. So let's say I drink 45 ounces of coffee, and it's crank. And by the end of the day, I was so tired. And I was like, why am I so tired? I'm like, oh, you were on speed today, stupid.
Yeah, basically, it's catching up with you.
Like the end of the, but before that, I felt so good. I wanted to hug everybody. I wanted to go to work. I wanted to get things done. I got a workout in. I did some writing. I made some phone calls.
That sounds pretty good to me. The only negative was you got tired at the end of the day.
End of the day, I was tired. Like when Trump goes to sleep, I'd love to see like a webcam of him when the Adderall dies out and he has to take a sleeping pill.
But whatever it is that he takes, the energy that guy has. I remember Bill O'Reilly interviewed him. It was like when he first became president, and it was before Bill O'Reilly went down, so around when he first became president. And he asked him, remember one which was the greatest thing ever was he asked him, he was like, so do you ever look around the White House and just think to yourself like, man, this is like really incredible. I'm the president of the United States. And Trump was like, yeah, it's a nice house. Like, he just seems so unimpressed with the fact that
probably kind of a shithole
he's
compared
like,
to where he lived.
But that's just Donald Trump. Like, it's always like, did you ever have like a serious moment where you thought about your role in history and all this in this house you're in? And he's like, yeah, Donald fucking Trump. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I live in a lot of nice houses.
And Bill O'Reilly asked him how much he sleeps a night, and he said about 3 hours. And he goes, does that like mess with you? And he goes, I always slept about 3 hours. Like, he was always kind of being this guy. He always loved. It was a big advantage. The celebrity factor for Donald Trump was a big advantage in politics, and a part of that was that, like, when he would get on those debate stages, you got to think like in the primary debates with other Republicans, a lot of these guys like Marco Rubio or someone like that, he might have been groomed by the establishment, but he hasn't been under these type of lights before. No. He hasn't had 100 million people watching him before. But Donald Trump stepped right in there like, this is exactly where I belong. Yeah. This is my home. And was so comfortable. Even someone like Jeb Bush, who's from the most powerful crime family in America. But has he ever been in a spotlight like that before?
No, not with a guy like Donald Trump who doesn't follow any of the rules.
Oof.
What are you going to say, Jamie?
I've heard recently, I don't even know if it's speculation, but like the drug he's taking is not like Adderall or some meth thing, but he's taking like Provigil, actually.
And could be.
I just found a tweet from like 2 years ago that his doctor apparently passes it out like candy.
Yeah, well, that will definitely pep you up and keep you.
It.
Yeah, I've taken that. I've taken Provigil. It without a doubt, it gives you a lot of energy. It's great if you have to drive and you're not going to be able to get any sleep. It's amazing for staying awake. But yeah, makes sense. I mean, it's not a speed technically. It's in a different class.
I've never taken it.
It doesn't elevate your heart rate. It's banned from, I believe it's banned from Olympic competition. See if that's the case. New Vigil, look up New Vigil. Is it finasteride? Is that what it's called?
Modafinil.
Modafinil. Finasteride is like,
name, I think.
That's Advil, isn't it? No, that's Viagra.
They added it. I'm
sure he takes that too.
Got added to the prohibited substances 10 days before the 2004 Olympics.
Yeah, because it does give you some sort of a stimulant effect. But not a stimulant effect. Like, you never had it?
I don't think so.
It's cool. It's weird. It gives you like this weird buzz. Like you have this like weird. I don't necessarily think it increases your IQ. Like I don't think it increases. I shouldn't say IQ. Cognitive performance, but I do think it makes you appear like you've increased your cognitive performance. Like maybe it makes you think that you're smarter, but it gives you more energy.
Sounds dangerous.
See, like, has it been proved? Like, look up no benefit for cognitive performance on Provigil. I might be wrong. I think there's maybe a slight uptick for a lot of people. But for a lot of people, I think one of the things that holds them back is they're just not that healthy. And they don't have a lot of energy. You know, like healthy people that are like really vibrant people that are in good shape, they have more energy for stuff, and that would make them think better. Researchers have found that modafinil boosts higher order cognitive function without causing serious side effects. Modafinil, which has been prescribed in the U.S. since 1998 to treat sleep-related conditions such as narcolepsy and sleep apnea, heightens alertness as much as caffeine does.
Oh, they're really selling it. Sounds awesome.
Yeah, it says, but do that again. Click on that again. Does it increase IQ? Boosts higher order cognitive function. I don't know what that.
You'd have to take a couple tests, I guess, to figure out if a boost. I don't know.
Right.
It'd be hard to test for.
Yeah. It's interesting. From what I understand, even though it was prescribed for narcolepsy, I believe it was developed for, I think it was developed as a performance-enhancing drug. I think they developed it they were trying to figure out how to increase cognitive function. And then they said, well, you can't just give a drug out for people that want to get smarter about shit. Like, you have to have a reason, like a medical condition, because of the state of our medical system. And so then they said, narcolepsy. It'll prevent it'll help against narcolepsy.
But a lot of these drugs are developed like that. Like they're developed for a purpose completely different than what they end up being.
900,000 prescriptions in 2017 in just the U.S. for it.
Most of them are me.
That's that makes it the number 328th most commonly prescribed.
Wow, it's really good.
It's almost a billion, though.
I'm not saying you should get on it. I definitely have. I haven't taken it for years, though. But
I'm not saying you should, but it looks like Trump's doing it, and things are working out pretty good for that guy.
Well, not right now, they're not. Now it's just
still
ranting and
going pretty
raving
good.
like a big baby. Take your lumps, sir. But when I know a guy's an author who says he can't function without it. And he writes. That's what he uses. He uses that stuff. He said he doesn't have any energy without it.
No,
but again,
it works.
I think a lot of people they're just not that healthy, right? And they need something to give them a little pick me up. But I talked to Tim Ferriss about it. Tim Ferriss is into a lot of performance enhancing things and a lot of biohacking type things, and he said that he didn't want to put it in his book. It was a 4-hour body or the 4-hour work. I don't remember which one it was. One of his books, one of his sort of like how to beat the system type books, because he goes, I felt like people were just going to start eating it like candy, and he goes, and I feel like there's always a biological. Like, there's no biological free rides. There's always some sort of negative aspect, especially to abuse of something like that. But when you're 74 and you eat nothing but French fries and you're out there kicking ass, you got to go, like, how much time has this guy got left anyway?
Well, yeah, but some people are just freaks like that. Like some people, it's true. Like some people don't, you know what I mean? There'll be like some people who are like eat like shit and like still fucking like some people just naturally have better cardio even if they're not like running as much as somebody else. Yep. They just naturally have it better. Some people can treat their bodies like shit and still function.
Yep.
Most people can't.
Right.
But Trump is, if nothing else, he is unique.
Well,
like,
he
is
kicked
different
COVID
than anyone.
So quickly. I don't care what drugs they gave him. But it's like, but he got access to drugs that we don't have. Okay, well, give them to everybody. Give those drugs to everybody, and then we open up the country again. Because of that fat guy who's almost dead. He's 74. What is the average life expectancy? I think he's above it.
I think, is it 77?
Is it? It's in the neighborhood.
Yeah, it's lowered this year because of all the stress.
Sure.
Let's just say it's 76. So he's 2 years away from being dead. And you guys gave him these magic drugs. Now he's doing 5 hours of campaigns every day. Whatever those drugs are, you got to give them out to everybody. 76.
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah. 81 for chicks. The last,
And they complain.
Well, the last 5 years, they just laugh. Fuck him, I win. It's kind of great. I mean, I hope, this is the big hope, right? Biden gets into office, the country relaxes, all this crazy shit about making lists and everything, people realize that's bad. And then whatever this vaccine is and whatever these treatments are, we're allowed to go back to normal again.
That would be the best case scenario. That I think that Joe Biden does something, we'll have a national mask mandate or something, and then we'll do that for 2 months, and then he goes, we defeated the virus, and we did it because we finally got serious and listened to the science. But I got to say, I'm not super optimistic that that's the way it's going to go.
Well, explain what you were saying to me before the show. We were talking about governors realizing
they
have this power.
Yeah, look, I think that what's happened over the last year in America is really like unprecedented. I mean, the idea that Americans have now accepted to some degree that we could be in a state where we're sitting at home watching our governors on television to find out what we're allowed to do today. Are we allowed to go to the park? Can I see my grandmother? Can I have my family over? Can I go to work? Like the most intimate, basic things that we all took for granted as freedoms. Of course, the government could never tell you can or can't do that. And now the governors have taken this authority. And there wasn't major pushback. I mean, there was a little, but not so much that they couldn't get away with doing it. And I don't know that they're just going to give up that authority now that they've seized it. I mean, my thing, what I think about COVID ultimately, the effect that the lockdowns and all this will have, I think it would be something like 9/11, where, right after 9/11, you remember there was all that fear that there'd be another terrorist attack. Like, oh my God, we're terrified this could happen again. And that's kind of gone away. People don't really live with a fear of another terrorist attack. But the Department of Homeland Security is here to stay. The TSA is here to stay. The wars that we're fighting are seemingly here to stay. The Patriot Act is here to stay. All of these things. And then all the stuff that grew out of the Patriot Act with the crazy NSA spying and all that. So my guess is that a lot of these things are going to be here to stay. When you give the government control, it's very hard to get it back from them.
Yes.
And that's a difficult dynamic.
Especially when it's for your own good, like in a medical emergency. And the problem is we've always lost so many people to so many different medical emergencies, so many different medical problems. I mean, what if the government changed the way people were allowed to eat? Because we talked about the money that's like all the heart disease and all the money that is going towards treating heart disease. And we have to put a stop to this. It's become a real issue in this country. We're losing 500,000 people a year, or whatever it is, to heart disease and heart attacks. We have to stop this, and so we're going to enforce certain rules and regulations in terms of how you can eat. And
once you accept this principle, there's a lot of different ways that you could go down this line. And the other big one I would say is like climate change. I mean, if you accept that COVID was this emergency so that we have to lock everyone in their houses and all this stuff, well, okay, you have a whole bunch of people who are arguing that climate change is an existential crisis that's going to, make all things, the planet uninhabitable for all living things. Well, then by that logic, wouldn't that be worth locking people in their homes over? And so it's very dangerous once you've set this precedent that the government can do this. And they all look around at each other and realize, we got away with this. And by the way, that's not even if you believe the lockdowns were the right thing to do for COVID, which I don't. But even if you believe that, you'd still have to be concerned about this like authoritarianism that we've kind of like ushered in over this last year. It doesn't mean that that's not a danger anymore. You know what I mean? Like even if you think chemotherapy is necessary to kill the cancer, you still have to worry about all the other, like effects of chemotherapy. And so that to me is what's very dangerous about all of this. Joe Biden ran on the idea that he's open to another round of lockdowns. And I wonder if people realize like how devastating the last round of lockdowns were and how devastating it would be to do it again. I don't know. I hope your version was right.
Has it really opened? When you say,
well,
like in certain places, like LA is locked down.
Yeah.
Well, never really opened.
Right.
They opened a few like things for a few weeks, like gyms and nail salons, and they closed it back down again.
Right. So in some places it is still pretty locked down, and then in some places it's kind of quasi locked down, not quite as much as it was back in March, April, May.
Right.
But New York City's never been the same, and businesses have been destroyed. People's lives have been destroyed over this. It's a real awful thing.
New York City has some crazy amount of apartments that are open. Like it's bananas.
People have been bailing on New York City.
Yeah, like I think the last check was like double the amount of normal apartments that are available.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, people have been moving out like crazy, and it's hard. It was hard for a while to get like any numbers on it, but I know like stories. I've heard people who work for moving companies saying like, you can't book us to move. We're completely booked up. Like we're moving everybody, and they're all going out of the city. U-Hauls were really hard to get
Triple.
for a while.
Look at that. Empty rental apartments in Manhattan. Triple, hitting nearly
Wow.
16,000.
Wow.
Whoa, and that was October 8th. I bet it's even worse now. Month later? That's nuts. Vacancy rate in Manhattan, which is typically 2 to 3%, is now under 6%. Whew. Wow.
I just saw something about Los Angeles or some counties in California might be getting rolling back now because the numbers are going up again.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
The numbers are going up again.
And of course, that all this stuff isn't just the lockdowns. It was also all the riots over this summer, and the fear that these riots were going to get worse and worse.
And the looting.
And the looting, yeah. Not that it was already pretty bad, but the fear was kind of like, oh, I guess, especially when it was a really crazy thing to see the cops step back and just let people loot.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
basically just like, okay, you're going to do it, go for it. And
Well, I
we're not
believe
gonna
in
be
Santa
here.
Monica, the sheriff gave orders for the cops to stand down. See if that's true. Because people were criticizing her. They were really upset.
And even if that hasn't been talked about in other areas, it was pretty clear that they were given orders to stand down in a lot of places.
Well, when the numbers get so high, I mean, the cops had abandoned that Minneapolis police station, right? I mean, it got to the point where they were overcoming the police station. They let them light the police station on fire.
Yeah.
Like when I got up in the morning after the shit hit the fan in L.A., and I saw this video of these cop cars like on the highway just lit on fire one after the other, covered in spray paint, windows smashed in. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
This is in L.A. This is not in Minnesota. This is not in Minneapolis where it actually happened. This is nowhere near it. And they're lighting other cop cars on fire.
Santa Monica police chief stepped down a couple weeks ago.
Okay. Recognizing that recent events, both here in Santa Monica and around the nation, have strained community police relations, Chief Renaud has made the decision to step aside so the Santa Monica Police Department can continue to move forward. A statement announcing her retirement said, I'm pretty sure she told the cops to stand down.
That's why it starts off saying that, like, amid anger over her response to the protests.
Yeah. The idea was that, and this was the same idea that the mayor of New York acted on, that you let them burn out, let them get it out of their system.
Which is, that really sucks if you happen to be one of those people caught in the burning it out.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like that's pretty rough.
You also open up the door to the fact that this can happen again, and if it does happen again, you're not going to do anything again.
Well, and it does, and it seems like there's no, at this point now, it's like if there is an incident that comes out where a cop killed a black guy, we're not even going to wait to figure out what happened here, do an investigation. Was this an unjustified shooting? Was it justified? It's just going to be the first knee-jerk reaction is like, let's start, burning stuff down. Which is like very disturbing and incredibly destructive. And I say that as somebody who's like not a fan of policing in this country and think we do have major problems. But I always, right from the very beginning in Minneapolis, was like, okay, this is like completely unacceptable. You can't like support people destroying communities because they're pissed off about an unrelated thing.
Yeah.
And any more than you can support the U.S., invading Iraq because they're pissed off about 9/11.
Right.
Like you can't just be like, hey, this guy did something to me, so I'm going to go take it out on this guy. And then people give you these like response like, so you care more about looting than about human lives or something. And you're like, well,
that's not,
why is it a choice? Like, why can't I be against all of it?
Yeah.
Why?
I know. It's a weird narrative.
Well, there was there's been a lot of those this year. Like there was you just want to get a haircut was a big narrative.
Yep.
If you like opposed the
lockdown,
lockdowns,
yeah.
Where you're kind of like, do you really think that's all that human life is? Leaving your home is just getting a haircut. It's not like, I don't know, seeing your family or getting a cancer screening or, like whatever. All of human life, pretty much. It's just reduced to you just want a haircut.
You being able to make your own decisions.
Yeah.
Like you being able to, if you, like one thing you're allowed to do is enter into the protests. So people were protesting and everybody thought that was okay. So you're shoulder to shoulder, which I agree with. I don't have any problem with protests. I think it's, You have a point. You're allowed to. It's part of freedom of assembly. It's part of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. It's part of who we are. You're allowed to protest things that you disagree with.
Yeah, if you're peaceful, I absolutely agree with you.
But if you're going to allow people to do that, you should also allow them to go to the gym. You should also allow them to go to comedy clubs. You should also allow them to go to restaurants. You should allow them to do whatever they want. And if you say, well, you have to have a consideration that you're going to get all these other people sick if you get sick, okay. But you have to have that with everything. You have to have that with... No one said, hey, I understand that you want to protest, and I'm with you, but here's the problem. This could spread the disease. Please don't do it. Yeah. No one said that. No one said that.
Do you remember when it first happened? When the protests first started, and basically the media and even a whole bunch of epidemiologists and stuff were like, no, it's okay. It's okay for the protest. That to me was one of the craziest moments I've ever lived through.
Cognitive dissonance.
I've all the time talk about how corrupt and how the corporate press are all liars and stuff and all that. But to actually see that they would go it was 3 months of this complete change of the American way of life, where it's listen, we all got to do this. You have to give up everything and stay home because we got to control this disease. And then they were oh my God, there were 20-year-olds at the beach. Oh my God, they're going to spread it. And then 2 days later, it was no, this is totally fine.
Yeah.
And you were what the fuck is going on? How could you possibly rob everything from people, but then you decide that because they're protesting a cause that we agree with the cause, therefore this is okay? That was fucking weird.
There's no
man.
negative consequences to it at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was really bizarre. And then there were things, I heard a lot of these kind of anecdotal stories that people would tell, but I mean, there were things where I heard this one story that always stuck with me about a guy whose wife was pregnant, and she got sick, and it looked like they might lose the baby, and they wouldn't let her in. They wouldn't let him in the appointment with her. So she had to. No, they didn't lose the baby, thank God, and everything was fine. But she was going into a sonogram to maybe find out that they had lost the baby, and they wouldn't let him be there to hold her hand through that.
Right.
And it's just I don't know if you could put a value on that or whatever, but that's quite a thing to ask someone not to, to be able to do. And then to have epidemiologists go well, we think that this protesting is so important that you can go do it. And you're so are you telling that guy that wasn't important enough? That wasn't important for him to be there with his wife?
That's an individual. That's a controlled environment. You could test both of them.
Yeah. And so it's just, it's pretty, and that really did a lot to undermine people's confidence in the scientists and the, you want to say follow the science. It's yeah, but this isn't science.
Well,
that's
they
politics.
recognize that there's a lot of malarkey. Yeah. This is not all 100% straightforward. Yeah. I was talking to a guy who's a very intelligent guy, and we were talking about one of these recent studies with COVID and UV light, and how it shows that it dies very quickly in sunlight. And he goes, well, that's why there was no spread after the riots. I go, did they stop when it went dark? What are you talking about? There was a spread. There was an uptick. It was going down, and then it came back up again. I mean, it's all within a week or two of the riot starting. Right. You can see the cases.
But it's not even
But he wanted to believe it.
Yeah. No, I understand.
He's not a part of the media, and there was no one around but me.
Yeah, but sometimes it's a very powerful thing to start with an emotional, position and then rationalize from there.
Yeah.
And we all do that, myself included.
A thing where you want to say things, and the other person says the same thing. You both agree. You agree to this weird mantra.
Yeah, and then you reinforce it with both of you.
Yeah,
because you just bounced it off each other, and so we're both more sure that we're
both on the right team.
But the weirdest part about it then was that, so then they'd go okay, oh my God, some kids went to spring break, these evil killers, how could these kids do this? Yeah. They don't care about grandma. And then 2 days later, we're protesting, and that's totally fine. We're not going to get COVID that way. And then another day later, it's oh wait, Trump had a rally? Oh, I mean, this is going to spread COVID like crazy. And it just got so bananas that it's dude, your agenda is showing. It's just obvious way. And you can maybe defend that agenda, but that's an agenda. Yeah. That's not science.
It's so inconsistent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's not science. But, I think also people felt like this was a real chance for change, and they were willing to take a risk. That these protests were important because they represented enough is enough. and that people are going to get out in the streets. And even if windows got broken and things got lit on fire, at the end of the day, we're going to fix all that and calm it down. And this was the idea behind it, right?
Yeah, but I think if you really wanted to make a change, then they couldn't have done a worse job of how they went about it. And I understand it's a lot of different people, so it's not like any one person you can blame. But like if you, my buddy Scott Horton, who's fucking genius, by the way, Scott Horton at the Libertarian Institute, and he, I'm wearing a shirt. Libertarian Institute. But he said, and I really loved this. He said when Black Lives Matter first came out, he was like, and he's like as against police brutality as any human being on the planet. He's been writing about this for decades, and he's like, he goes, don't call it Black Lives Matter. Call it accountability for killer cops, and just run with that. Like, just run with the narrative that, look, this is what we want, and it's something you can't argue for. Don't insert the racial thing. It's going to get played in a million different ways. It ends up like creating all these dynamics that aren't helpful to getting to the root of the problem, which is we want these 5 major policy reforms. You know, we want to, accountability for killer cops, and the war on drugs, and qualified immunity, and civil asset forfeiture. Like pick some really important things that would actually save lives and go hard at those. But the problem is that then you have the way the movement goes, and then you have the rioting and stuff like that and the looting, and then this ends up turning a lot of people off who would maybe be sympathetic to you.
But don't you think that over and over again you see white cop, black victim, white cop, black victim? Over and over and over again, you see this narrative. And whether or not it's representative of interactions with cops as a whole, it doesn't matter, because those are the videos that go viral. I think there's probably millions of interactions where nothing goes wrong at all, but those don't matter. What matters is when they do go viral, so many times, Eric Gardner, this George Floyd case, so many times, white cop, black victim. So you have to acknowledge the racial aspect of it. I think just by saying it, justice against killer cops or get rid of killer cops, you're not addressing the thing that is maybe most disturbing to many people, is that it keeps being a white cop and a black man.
I think that there are certainly videos where that is the case. There's also a lot of videos where that's not the case. They don't get the same amount of play,
right? But it doesn't
in the press.
But the ones that become viral, these big stories.
But the question might be why those ones become such big stories and the other ones don't. My point is that when you play up the racial aspect of it, what you end up doing is then you start having this conversation we're having where, okay, so about twice as many white people are unarmed white people are killed by cops every year than black people, but black people aren't half the population of white people. So black people are like 13% of the population. So for them to be, whatever it is, like 40% or something like that of the killings, it is disproportionate. Then you have to take into account where the high crime neighborhoods are, how many interactions they're having with police. Like I understand there are these videos that go viral. What happened to me, in my opinion, what happened to George Floyd was like horrific, and people should go to jail over that shit. I think what happened to Breonna Taylor was horrific, and people should go to jail over that shit. It's not clear to me at all that race was a factor in those cases. I could be wrong about that. I just haven't really seen any evidence to suggest that it was, but maybe it is. I just think that you end up going down this road. So one of the activists in Minneapolis said this thing, and this is where like wokeism comes in to poison this shit from my perspective. So he said they don't want to call it police brutality anymore. They want to call it systemic racism, because this is just another form of systemic racism. Forget the term police brutality. Mm-hmm. And what ends up happening when you look at things that way is what you don't get rid of is police brutality. What you end up getting rid of is Aunt Jemima. It becomes a distraction of other issues rather than focusing on the major issues that you care about. And I'm just saying, if you wanted to be effective, I think Black Lives Matter would be better off to share some of those videos of it happening to white people also and go, look, this isn't just black people's problem. This is a cop on civilian problem. This is a government authoritarian problem.
Well, there have been some that went viral. The one that was most disturbing to me was the guy in Phoenix.
Shaver, I believe his last name was.
In the
on
hallway.
His knees.
Yeah, crawling. They made him crawl, and he kept reaching back to pick his pants up as they were falling down. He's crying and begging for his life, and the guy lit him up on the ground.
It's the worst one I've ever seen.
It's insane because he made the guy crawl to him, and then he gunned him down as he was crawling to him.
And he's screaming at him the whole time.
Yeah, screaming at him.
Oof.
Well, and he had a toy gun or something like that, and they saw him with a toy gun out the window, and they called in the SWAT team, so they came in geared up and revved up. There's been a lot of police brutality videos. The Sandra Bland one is particularly disturbing.
Yeah.
Right? She didn't do anything wrong. Like, he's telling her to put her cigarette out in her car. Like, who the fuck are you to tell her
That's
to put
the
her
one who
cigarette
died in
out?
jail.
Yeah,
She
yeah.
hung herself, or something happened.
Or
It was
something
just-
happened.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? We don't know. That's part of the problem. But the racial aspect of it, when if you're a person who's a black person or any person of color, and you see over and over again a white cop killing a black person, whether it's representative, I mean, you're not gonna think when you see those videos, oh, well, there's a million interactions and most of
Sure.
them are positive. You're just going to know your experiences with cops, and if cops have bullied you and fuck with you, or maybe you've been a victim of police brutality yourself, and then you're going to think of how many times there's been a white cop doing it to a black person. And I think the number's not insignificant. It has to be addressed.
Yeah, look, I certainly understand why that would be a lot of people's perspective. I get that completely. I'm just saying that from the way I look at it is like, I think that really for the first time that I've ever seen, I thought leading up to the George Floyd situation that right-wingers were really getting red-pilled on cops. Like, they were actually getting really pissed off at the cops because the cops were the ones enforcing these lockdowns, and they were against it. And there was a lot of like stuff where right-wingers would be like, can you believe these cops are actually doing this? If they'll shut down, they were shutting down churches. That's something that pisses right-wingers off. Right. And then when the George Floyd thing came out, I think pretty much everybody, not everybody, but the vast majority of the public was like, that is really horrible what happened to that guy.
Yeah.
And I think there was a lot of energy that could have actually been used for real change. And I think that what's happened since then has basically blown it. Because you see what happens then when people see rioting and looting, who do they want? They want the cops.
Yeah.
They want the cops back. It's almost like that was proof. Like, it's almost like you're working to prove the right-wingers right about what they thought about the cops to begin with, which is that, well, if we don't have cops, this is what we have. Just looting and rioting and violence.
Well, if you don't have cops and then you have civil unrest, and then also you have a bunch of people that have no money because they've been locked down for all this time, and then you have opportunity because you get sheriffs like the one in Santa Monica that tells everybody to stand down, and then you have chaos. Yeah, it's a recipe for disaster, but it's also... It's real easy to break things. It's not so easy to fix them. It's not so easy to bring it all back together again the way it was 11 months ago. Like, try getting there right now. It's going to take you 11 years.
Well, that's right. And you may never get it.
You might never get it.
One thing that I think people, the ones who really wanted Trump out, and I understand why a lot of them did. I think a lot of people just had like Trump fatigue. Like, they're like, I just can't deal with this bullshit anymore. Like, I just can't. But I think they should realize the possibility that we're never going to a pre-Trump world again. Like, never 100%.
Right.
And I think we may never go to a pre-COVID world again.
Right.
And we may never go to a Black Lives Matter world again. Like, we might get closer to that than we are now. But I don't know that we'll ever go back to that time completely. In the same way that we never went to a pre-9/11 world again.
Or a pre-Kennedy assassination world again.
Yeah, that's it.
There's certain events in our history that they change us forever. And this is most certainly one of those events. But you probably could have said the same thing about the Spanish flu, although I don't think the government or the media was as sophisticated back then. And there was a lot more... There's a lot more hardship in the world, period. And then what happened right after the Spanish flu was the Roaring '20s, right? That was immediately afterwards. And then, of course, the Great Depression. There's been a lot of ups and downs and hills and valleys back then. But those people got through that and then stopped wearing masks. So it's weird when you see the photos from the Spanish flu. I never knew that they were wearing masks, that people wore masks in public. But when you look at these old black and white photos, it's really kind of interesting. Like, you go, oh... Look at that. It's almost like, I know they're real pictures, but if they weren't, like, someone's like photoshopped masks on these people and pretended that there was a pandemic back then, that's what it looked like. It looked almost fake.
Yeah, I know. I've seen some of those photos, but I know what you mean. But I think like what you said is really the heart of it. That you go, life was just so much harder back then.
Here we go. Look at this.
Yeah,
these people sitting around. It looks like they're watching a baseball. Is it a football game?
I think so. Yeah.
Look at them. They all have masks on. Crazy.
But they still went to see the game.
You hear about the flu being down dramatically. Look at these. All these players have masks on. Isn't that nuts? The football squad has masks on. What year is that, Jamie?
I typed in Spanish flu sport football game because I remember seeing this picture. So it says it's 1918 over on this one too. So,
wow, that's nuts. So did they ultimately come up with a vaccine for the Spanish flu? Is that how? Look at that, they're playing baseball with the fucking masks on. Wow. See, doesn't that seem fake to you? I know it's real.
Yeah.
But it seems like, what? I never saw these before. Like, nobody ever. That guy's a rebel. See that guy right there? He's on Parlor. He doesn't wear a mask.
I feel like I also saw something that was like, this was not actual. They didn't wear masks, but like, I don't know which was accurate.
I think we got to stop people from wearing masks in their Twitter profiles. Stop.
That's
Stop.
basically the same thing as your pronouns in your bio. It's basically the exact
Yeah.
same thing. Stop letting everybody else know that you're a good person. If you want to be a good person, just go be a good person.
Some people do podcasts with masks on.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
I've seen that.
Really?
Mm-hmm. No. Oh, yeah. Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
my God.
Oh, yeah.
See, by the way, this is what I hate all of this shit where it's like, how about like, and this is one of the things that I hate about like wokeism in general too, is that it lets everybody kind of like pretend they're like, let everyone else know they're a good person, but you don't actually have to do shit.
Did you see Kamala Harris at one of the press conferences wearing a mask while she was talking? One of her speeches, she had a mask on while she was speaking.
There's so many things that are so weird about this whole response where you're like, that doesn't even make sense, even by your own logic.
No one's near you.
Did you see when they fucking...
You're on a podium.
So they canceled the second debate between Trump and Biden, and then they both had live events the night of the debate? Like, they just both had an event. He did one with... Trump did one with NBC, and Biden did one with CNN. And you're like, you guys are... So fucking, like, get on a plane and fucking debate each other. Like, what are you doing?
Well, I think the first one was so aggressive. Like, what Trump did was so disruptive and aggressive that it was a bad strategy.
Yes.
And I think the second one was brilliant. If he did in the first one what he did in the second one, I think he would have much more momentum coming into the election.
Or maybe if he had the middle one, so there were 3 debates, you know? Like, if that one hadn't been canceled, he would have had 2 more opportunities.
What was the third one?
The third one was the one you're talking about.
The second one.
The second one.
Let's just talk about the actual debates.
No, but I'm just saying, like, maybe if he had another debate where he could have handled it the way he did in that second one also, maybe if he had 2 performances like that, it would have helped him a little bit more.
Right.
But
I see what you're saying. Yeah. If he just did that in the first without the bad one, without the interrupty one, that one's just so hard to listen to. It was like, I was like, God damn. Because, that was when there was talk about, like, Trump was tweeting that he wanted to come on here and have me and him and Biden talk for 4 hours. And I was like, what would I do if he was doing that? I would have to stop him. I would have to say, hey, man, sir, I understand you're the president, Mr. Trump. You can't do that. Because you got to let the guy talk, and then don't say anything, and then you talk. Like, this is the only way this is going to work.
Yeah, but I think you would have handled it like that in a way better way than Chris Wallace was able
doing
to.
the best he could, and he's got 90 minutes, which is preposterous, and they have 2 minutes to answer questions, which is ridiculous. These are really important questions. Like, why do you have 2 minutes? Like, what if after 2 minutes you're like, I think I got a better way to say that? No, shut the fuck up. Stop. 2 minutes are over. Sir, your time is up. Your time is up. Like, what kind of, why is there a race?
It's insane. It makes no sense at all. And that's one of my favorite things about this show is that you've almost proven, I think it's part of the reason why so many of those establishment types like resent you a lot for it, is that you've proven that their whole model is stupid. Like, this model is stupid.
Well,
you have a show where people need time to unpack things and have a long conversation. If you're talking about really serious, complex issues, the idea that we're debating who gets to have the nuclear football, but we've got to do it in this limited time, and you'll have 30 seconds each.
It's also
is
important
retarded.
that they don't know what they're going to talk about. That's important, too.
Yeah.
One of the important things about podcasts is there's no one ever sits down with like, okay, we're going to hit this, and then we're going to hit that. And
Alex
then
Jones tried to.
the producer, well,
he came with his list.
He had things that he wanted to talk about that were important. That he felt were important.
But that's not what you're saying. You're talking about more of like the scripted kind
I'm
of
talking
like,
about me bringing things up with them. Like if I said, sir, your job reform or, job numbers and have elevated, what do you attribute that to? Like that kind of shit where they get to prepare. If you have enough time to let these guys talk, just talk, and no pressure whatsoever on figuring out how to answer a sentence or a subject rather coherently, you're going to get a better understanding of who that person is. Now, with Trump, everybody thinks they already have a good understanding of who he is because he goes in these long, rambling, self-serving diatribes about subjects. But to see that, if you get him to calm down a little and see Biden and him talking through things, just let him talk. Let him talk through things. Let Biden say something about Trump. Let Trump say something about Biden. Don't say you only have 2 minutes. Don't say any of that shit. Just let them talk. See what happens out of that.
I wish that would have happened.
That would have been fascinating.
That really would have been. And by the way, I think Trump, because Trump is kind of a master troll, I think he knew that Biden would never agree to it, and that's half the reason why he did it.
No, he would never fucking agree.
There's no way.
Like that.
That would not have been good for Biden.
It would be so beneath him to come here, too. Like, what are you doing?
But would it, though? I mean, dude, you're fucking...
In a lot of ways.
Well, yeah, I guess. I think the corporate press would have lost their shit because if they lose that to you, then they've just lost everything. Would you have Trump on? Ex-President Trump?
It just doesn't seem like a smart move at this point. But I think all of those...
Like in a year?
I don't know. We'll talk in a year. We'll figure it out.
That'd be great, dude.
He's going to run again. If
Maybe.
they boot him out of office in 2024, he's going to start running in January. And
he might.
Yeah, he's going to run for 4 years. He's going to talk shit for 4 years.
I have a feeling Trump's... they're going to really come after him in his post-presidency. I think he's going to get kicked off Twitter. I think he's going to get completely like the Alex Jones treatment on social media. And I think that they're legally going to try to come after him. I just think there's no way.
You're right.
They can't just let him be Trump, which would be amazing. But they can't just let him be Trump. He's literally, he could set up his own Oval Office and say, I am the real president. I'm the real president. This is now the Oval Office, and I'm giving the military commands from here. They stole it from me.
Didn't he have some wacky painting with like him sitting there and like all the other presidents behind him with like their hands on his shoulder or something?
Oh, I don't know.
Am I remembering this correctly?
I don't know this.
I think he had something in the Oval Office that was like really preposterous, where people saw it and they're like, "What in the fuck are you doing?"
I believe it.
There it is, right there. I mean, they're all sitting around. Ronald Reagan's at the table. Nixon's there. Lincoln. Nixon, yeah.
He's next to Eisenhower.
Is he the only one with a tie? No, Eisenhower's a tie as well.
No, Eisenhower's
Roosevelt.
in the yellow.
Roosevelt has a tie. Yeah, Eisenhower's in the yellow. Eisenhower's relaxed. He's retired.
Nice,
so's Reagan. And there's GW in there. Is that the painting that he has on his wall? Mm-hmm. Trump hangs fantasy painting with other GOP presidents at the White House. Look at that. So he's got this president, them all yucking away. We're all having a great old time with you. Oh, wow, Lincoln's there. Mm-hmm. Oh, how weird is that? Imagine they're all looking at Trump when Lincoln's alive. You'd be like, hey, man, what was it like in 1776? you wouldn't be talking to Trump. That's hilarious. Him with his red tie. They would all be staring at Lincoln going, Jesus, how'd you get here? What's going on, man?
Yeah, probably. You'd be like, holy shit, Eisenhower's alive? Holy shit, Lincoln.
Holy shit. Yeah, you just pull Lincoln and Eisenhower aside. Eisenhower's speech about the military-industrial complex when he's leaving office is, to this day, one of the most chilling things I've ever seen. It's right up there with Oppenheimer talking about, quoting the Bhagavad Gita after he detonated the bomb.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa.
Yeah, what is this thing like, I am the maker of death or something like
that?
Well,
he quotes Shiva. I am become death, destroyer of worlds. Yeah.
Yeah, that's creepy. But Eisenhower's thing, I think, I could be wrong about this, but I believe that Trump, in the clip we played earlier, is the second president to ever use the term military-industrial complex. I don't know. I could be wrong about that, but I've never heard another president say the term military-industrial complex other than Eisenhower in his farewell address and Trump. And it was particularly, crazy coming from Eisenhower, who's the fucking general, like he's the guy who led the victory in World War II, which leads to this creation of really what we know as the military-industrial complex. And even as he's going, he's like, listen, let me tell you something. Yeah. We've created something here that we got to really worry about because we're not America anymore the way we've been before this. Now we have a whole industry that's pushing toward war. And we got to guard against this power. And he says sought or unsought, which is a really interesting way to put it. It's like, even if they're not trying to, there's kind of these natural forces of like, you're a weapons company, so What do you think?
Yeah.
You think we should have a bigger military budget or a smaller one?
Right.
Probably a bigger one, right? And then it's like, so all of these forces, and then the next president after Eisenhower is JFK, who, some shit went down there too. So
They wrapped it up real quick with him.
yeah. So there's a lot of really, kind of interesting history there, but let's just say we didn't listen to Eisenhower and we did not guard against power sought by the military-industrial complex.
Yeah. It's it's such an interesting choice too, because I guess he had the ability to say whatever he wanted in the nation's address, being the president. Like it seems pretty clear that he didn't have to run that by anyone. And you wonder, what do they have to run by now? When you have the discussion where people say, oh, they always lie when they want to get into office, and then they get into office, they don't do shit. They don't do any of the things they said they were going to do. What happens when you get in there? Is it like the Bill Hicks joke where they show you an angle of the Kennedy assassination, and then you go, well, what's my agenda? Is that it? Or do they show you a real model of the world that you're not privy to if you're not the president? Do they sit you down and talk about all the threats and the problems and how it all really works and ties together? Like, what is it?
It's and it's I don't know, but it's also possible that it's kind of somewhere in between, where maybe they're not showing you the Kennedy assassination film like the great Bill Hicks joke, but look, I know that Donald Trump got in there and he ran on, we're ending all of these wars and that's it. Now, from like a Trumpian perspective, it wasn't like a Ron Paul, like these wars kill all these innocent people. It was like a Trump, like, this is bad business. We're wasting money on these wars, so we're ending them. Like, I'm too smart for them.
Trump is blasting the military-industrial complex, but he's one of its biggest boosters.
Well, that's true too. That's for sure
Trump
legit.
has made the purchase, public display, and foreign sales of military hardware a major priority of his administration.
Yeah.
I found 2 articles that were talking about, like, he says the stuff about the military-industrial complex, however, his actions say it differently. Like, he gave them more money than anybody ever gave.
Oh yeah, no, there were increased defense budgets under Donald Trump for sure.
Right, but they're also. Do you think he really actually is trying to get out of these countries, though? I mean, you could do both things, right? You can increase the defense budget, but not do it in an offensive way. Increase it defensively. Increase the amount of money that you give to the troops, their ability to fight ISIS, the ability to make new weapons and innovate.
Yeah.
You could do both things simultaneously, right?
I think that, at least from everything I've read, that he really is trying to get out of Afghanistan and that he really is trying to work out a deal to end that war.
Here it says, the idea that Trump is taking on the defense and industrial base is pure fantasy. A National Security Action, a liberty advocacy group composed of former Obama administration staffers, said on Tuesday. All right, we're good, Jamie. All right, we can shut that off.
But look, I mean, I will say, though, to Trump's credit, he did avoid getting us in another war, and there were some opportunities. And he flirted with it, certainly in Iran, and really in Venezuela as well. But he never got us into that war. And there were definitely a lot of people around him who really wanted him to get into those wars. Yeah. And he did avoid that. But, like when he first came in and he was running on like ending all of these wars, the military guy who he made his national security advisor was Flynn. Like, that was his guy who was going to come in and lead us out of these wars. And what happened? Immediately, the NSA and the FBI targeted Flynn, got dirt on him, got him removed, and then they get somebody else in there. So it might be also that they don't necessarily have to, like, threaten your family or show you the angle of JFK, but they could just be like, well, we're just going to remove all the people from your cabinet who we don't like, kind of get our people in there and keep the machine rolling.
That Flynn shit is spooky because you think that a guy who gets to that level of the military, he's immune to that.
Not him.
No.
And he is, from what I've heard, like a little bit of a crazy guy. But he was not working with the Russians. That was just complete bullshit. And they had nothing. The FBI completely set him up.
It's just so amazing that they can do that. What's up, Jamie?
I was just like, remember he wanted to run that parade where he did actually do it, where he brought in all the tanks and missiles and troops and fucking showed off everything we have.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was a big thing he wanted. No, Trump was not.
Look at my cock.
Yeah, basically.
Look at my giant metal cock out there dragging it down the street.
That's basically what it all came down to.
Fuck, Dave. It's so depressing. What can you do? What do you do to stay happy? What do you do?
What do I do?
Yeah, what do you do to avoid just getting sucked into this constant state
Well,
of existential woe?
I got a perfect little 2-year-old, and I love my wife. So, but really, that's the best you can do is try to like get good people around you in your life, be good to them, create your own little world as much as you can, and then I think that you. Like the best thing is to try to keep perspective that even with all the fucked up shit in the world, there's always been a ton of fucked up shit in the world, and people have persevered through far worse than what we're going through right now. And I think that's kind of the best take to have. That's what keeps me sane.
Yeah. Right. Make your little circle happy. Who are you around? The people you're around. Be kind. Be friendly. Have a good time. Be nice to each other. Enjoy your time together. Enjoy each other's company. Yeah. Just not. That's when you think about what you can do in terms of impacting the world or impacting the country. It's real. It's a cliche to say start with the people that are around you. It really is cliche, but it is kind of true because you do have a ripple effect on the way you treat people and the friendships you have and that how it affects other people. And the more good people that you're around, the more they affect other people.
Yeah.
There's at least some kind of a ripple effect. If we can get more people to adopt it, that's where mushroom legalization comes in.
Yeah, well, they had some good victories for mushroom.
Oregon's like, fuck it, do coke.
Yeah.
Oregon's like, look, if you're gonna light everything on fire all the time, how about do mushrooms? Do whatever the fuck you want. Just stop lighting things on fire.
Yeah, but you know what? By the way, it's great that they did that, and it's the smartest thing to
Yeah.
do. The whole idea of drugs being illegal, the war on drugs, is so misguided and just awful, and just ruins people's lives, creates black markets, leads to violent crime, destroys neighborhoods. It's at least I'd say probably 60% of the entire immigration problem is just the war on drugs. They'll be like, well, there's these gang members who are smuggling drugs over the borders. And it's like, well, yeah, why? Because there's a demand for them, and it's a black market, and it's illegal. So this is where you get it from. And yeah, of course, there's crime associated with that too. I mean, it's like, so it is and mushrooms is just the idea that it's illegal is insane. I mean, it's like, first off, you can't get addicted. Physically, I don't think you could get addicted. Nope. Your body will reject it after a certain point in time. Yeah. Like you can't, it's never made anyone do anything fucking.
Well, people have done
okay, maybe not. That's an overstatement. It's
especially broken people.
It's not a huge problem that people are taking mushrooms and committing violent crimes. There's just really no justification for it.
Especially when there's alcohol all over the place. I mean,
come on.
Fucking liquor stores every other corner. It's too easy to get some drugs and impossible to get others. And the fact that the ones that are super beneficial, like there's a study that I posted the other day on my Instagram that they show that psilocybin therapy is 4 times more effective for treating depression than antidepressants that we're currently using.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the war on drugs. Somebody wrote an article that the war on drugs was that drugs were a big winner in 2020 in the war on drugs because of the elections. Drugs won in a lot of places, like legalized marijuana in New Jersey, Montana, Portland says fuck it, let's go with everything. I think.
The drugs have fought a real guerrilla strategy in the war on drugs. It's been 40 years of the cops just kicking their fucking ass, but drugs never gave up. They always hung in there. They disappear, and then they come back strong.
Like what drugs have gone down in usage?
What
and during the war on drugs, what drugs have people maybe not even heroin because pills, but like shooting up maybe?
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know.
Shooting up?
Oh, Quaaludes. There's some things that have gone away that were really
right,
popular
but they don't,
in past
Yeah, but
times,
I think it's unrelated to the legality of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think these things kind of ebb and flow, right? Like there was like crack cocaine came and kind of left, and then heroin like got big again, but they were all illegal the whole time. It's not like they were gone because they're illegal. People who are doing heroin, people who are throwing their lives away with really hard drugs are not affected by a law. And people who would never do heroin are not going to start doing heroin because it's legal.
Do you remember Just Say No?
How
old? You're a younger
man. I was young for that, but I do remember it. Yeah,
I remember. I believe I was in high school. And I remember it was around that, maybe I was early 20s, but I remember seeing that going, what in the fuck did you just say? Just say no? Oh, you fixed it.
So, yeah, we never knew that was an option.
I didn't know you could just say no.
If only someone had given me this tool.
There's certain things in the past that are just like, you look back, you go, what? Do you remember the codes for like what's the possibility of a terrorist attack? We're at code orange. I'd go, oh shit, it's code orange? What does that mean?
And it was so much just to keep everyone in a state of fear. Uh-oh, did you guys see we went from orange to red today?
Oh,
ooh, that's
shit,
bad.
we're code red. What do they know that we don't know?
That's what California's in now for the COVID stuff. For like they're in purple, whatever. Like and they're
Purple is your dick.
Threatening to change to go
Your
something
blue
different.
balls have turned your dick gangrene. It won't let you leave the house for 8 months.
But it's always like when you've got like a decade to look back at the shit, that's when you always see how full of shit the government was.
Yeah.
Like, oh, they were so full of shit about that. They're full. That's when you look back and you see, Dick Cheney going, we're going to find those weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah.
They're here somewhere. And you're like, oh, he was just lying to all of us. This was complete bullshit.
What was was it Colin Powell that said the proof might come in the form of a mushroom cloud?
I believe that was Condoleezza Rice who
it?
said that. But Colin Powell went to the UN with drawings of Saddam Hussein's mobile WMD like fucking trucks or something, and he was like, this is where they go down here and this is where they go down. It's just all made up nonsense, but just like really selling it, like really.
I wonder what they told him. I wonder if he believed it while he was saying it, because he didn't seem like the type of guy to be lying about something like that.
But then he's like the one that they kind of like vindicate later. Like he's supposed to be the good one.
Yeah.
He never, behind closed doors, he really never wanted this war. It's like, but then he went and sold it to everybody. Wouldn't that make him even worse? Like, look, you can resign. Like that is an option.
Right.
You don't have to just go like, well, I'm against this, but they want me to sell a war based on lies. So got to be a team player and go, get the country in a war. How about don't do that?
Do you think that he ever really did believe it, though? Was there maybe a time where he got the evidence and he was like, oh, shit, this is real?
I don't know. I think that he was a part of the first Iraq war. And I think that my guess is that there might be part of him who really wanted to go fucking take Saddam out. As you could imagine, if you were leading a military invasion and some of your men were killed by this guy, even though not too many were killed, but I'm sure you'd have a personal thing. Yeah. And so I think that might have been part of it. I think they all, you can't remove it from the context that George H.W. Bush's, presidency, they fought a war in Iraq, and then W's in there, and now all of a sudden basically was handed a blank check for war. Like, well, 9/11 just happened. What do you want? What war do you want? You got it. Because whatever one you decide, but make it a good one, And
you remember how many people were behind it, though?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. It was a blind patriotism time. Folks who don't remember, you're too young. In 2001, when the Iraq War hit, when 9/11 hit, we were overwhelmed by American flags on cars. It was crazy. Like, it was way, way different than anything I'd seen before. You would drive to work, and everyone would have an American flag on their car.
Yeah.
I remember looking around going, whoa, this is nuts. But there was also this weird feeling of unity. Like people were letting people in front of them in their lane. There was this weird feeling of we're together.
Well, it's really interesting that you say that, because you're right. It was the most unified we've ever been, and that almost is the other part. That unity isn't necessarily good. Like unity can go in some bad places too. So with Joe Biden's call for unity now, well, we had real unity after 9/11. I mean, as much as you could have, and what we did was basically get behind George W. Bush as he ruined the 21st century.
We thought we were getting behind George W. Bush because we thought there was weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and he was going to go in there and take them out.
Yeah, but it's much easier when everybody's unified and behind a leader. It's much easier to be persuaded that he's doing this great thing for all of us. And yeah, I think people were behind him for somewhat noble reasons. Like, yeah, we're going to go get the guys who got us. And by the end of George Bush's, like nowadays, looking back at George Bush, it's hard for people who were like young then or weren't alive then to even imagine that he was a really popular president. No. Because by the end, he had given us 2 disastrous wars and the worst economy. And Katrina,
he was really popular right after 9/11.
Yeah.
Like he gave a great speech
in New York. I loved him then. Yeah, I was in.
Yeah, we were all in. Do you remember when he had that mission accomplished banner over that?
Yeah.
And everybody was like, what the fuck are you talking about? We're still there.
And we're still there.
Yeah.
We're still there now.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah.
What's the mission?
Well, I suppose he could say we took out Saddam Hussein.
Yeah.
I mean, if that was the mission, like, okay.
I was watching Saddam Hussein's trial yesterday.
Oh, yeah?
I watched it on YouTube. It popped up, and I said, let me watch this. It was wild.
He's screaming at the judge.
He's screaming at the judge. Just one of his guys who works for him is in his underwear. Like it was so strange.
And he's screaming at the God that he wouldn't, at that judge, that he wouldn't let them have a prayer break. Or do you remember? Did you ever see that part where he's like, "We should have a prayer break now," and he's like, "This is a court of law," and he's like, "Is this greater than Allah?" and like yelling at it, but it's really weird. It's crazy to
Wasn't
imagine.
he like secular though? Didn't his administration was?
Well, relatively. For that part of the world, but he was still, like, I mean, they're all Muslims, and like but it was really crazy to think this dictator who ruled over this country with an iron fist is now sitting there with a judge, like telling him what to do, and it's just a very weird fucking dynamic.
Yeah.
But that war really fucking destroyed the fucking region, man.
Yeah.
It was such a bad idea to fucking overthrow Saddam Hussein. It was like the worst foreign policy decision. Forget even just like this is, evil, we're going to kill all these innocent people. Just the you are going to destroy this region and just throw it into chaos.
And isn't it weird that the idea of overthrowing an evil dictator can be a bad idea?
Yeah.
It's weird, right? Well, you say I don't necessarily agree that we're the police force of the world, but I do think that if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be the United States, right? So let's go in and take out this bad guy. But it's not that simple.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Yeah.
No, and even like supporting a dictator sometimes is like the best option in terms of like the loss of overall life. That's the best,
Absolutely.
Which is a really weird decision. Like you have to support someone who is terrorizing their people, because if you don't, then you get what's in Libya.
Yeah.
Which is like a failed state.
Yeah.
It's a crazy place.
So much worse for regular people than it was under Gaddafi.
Do you remember the video of them capturing Gaddafi when the guy shoves a knife up his ass?
Yep.
And he's just standing there. He's in such shock.
Dragging him, beating him, sodomizing him.
When they realized that they had him.
Yeah.
And he realized that they had him. And he's surrounded by all these people. And this just full shock. The guy shoves a knife up his ass.
Yeah.
Like you see the guy do it. And he's standing there like, well, this knife goes up his ass. Like, what?
Imagine this country that you've ruled over for decades. And then fucking just all of a sudden they've got you.
He ruled over when I was a kid.
Yeah. Yeah. He was the boogeyman for a while.
They put him in place, right? Did the United States put him in place?
I'm not
like
sure about that.
There was something either he or we supported him once he got into place.
We did. We supported him at one period. In fact, we were working with him after 9/11. He was really cooperating with the George W. Bush administration. He was ratting out terrorists, giving us the fucking terrorists. He turned over all his chemical weapons and stuff. He wanted to play ball. He saw what the Bush administration was doing, and he was like, okay, I'm getting on Team America here. And that didn't do any good for him.
One of my favorite Hillary Clinton videos was her laughing after he was dead.
Yeah.
Her going, we came, we saw, he died.
Yeah, it's like, hey, Hillary, like one of her handlers has to be like, hey, we're reminding you, you're trying to convince these people you're human.
Yeah, it is. This guy's, is it a stick?
I don't think so.
Is it a knife?
I think so.
Whatever, he's shoving something up his
It's a frame-by-frame breakdown.
ass.
Oof.
And that is a knife.
Yeah, I think so.
Oof.
That's all that was.
Let me do that again. Right up his ass. Like, dude, I'm going to be the guy. You know how they have that flag is planted in Iwo Jima and all the troops, and they're standing there holding up that flag? I wonder if where that guy lives, they got a bronze statue of him with the knife going right up Saddam Hussein's asshole.
Yeah, Gaddafi's.
Oh, excuse me, Gaddafi.
Not,
Gaddafi's asshole.
Yeah, I don't think so, because the country's completely been destroyed since then. So that if they did have that statue, it's probably fallen down and been melted and
turned into bullets.
Yeah, turned into bullets or helped the slave trade there in some way.
Have you seen the slave trade on YouTube where you could watch the videos?
From Libya, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Insane.
Yeah.
Insane, like slave auctions.
And this was, by the way, this is what this whole thing what we're talking about, overthrowing Gaddafi, destroying the country, leading to the open air slave trade markets. This was all done under Obama's administration, with Hillary Clinton pushing for it, with Joe Biden as the vice president. So again, just the idea that like, oh yay, Trump's gone and we've returned to normal. All right, But if normal is, getting us into wars in Libya, in Syria, in Yemen, continuing the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, there's some pretty negative aspects to normal.
So let's play not even devil's advocate, but let's imagine, what do you do if you don't help them overthrow Libya? If you do decide this guy's an evil dictator and has been for decades, you want to get him out, but what do? Do you fund the people that are trying to get him out? And if that doesn't work, and what if it does work and they get him out and they kill him like they did? How do you ensure that democracy gets instituted when it's never been successful anywhere else that we've overthrown? Is there one place that we've overthrown? They're like, look at them now, they're doing great.
Germany and Japan. That would be the examples, right?
Sure.
In Germany and Japan. However, in order to achieve that, we had to fight the bloodiest war in human history and straight up target civilians. Yeah. I mean, in order to achieve that, we had to just straight up be like, yeah, we're dropping bombs on women and children intentionally. Yeah. Not like they're collateral damage. Yeah. Like we're nuking cities in Japan. We're doing, and that doesn't seem like it's going to be achieved in the Middle East. I think the idea that we can do anything to ensure that there's a fair democratic process in Libya is just so beyond absurdity. We're having trouble doing that here. Like the Washington, D.C., Washington has a huge crime problem. Yeah. These politicians can't even figure out crime in Washington, D.C.
Right.
The idea that they're going to take on the crime problem in Libya is like so beyond absurd. I just think like this country was never founded to be the policeman of the world. We're not supposed to be an empire, even though we are. It's empires crumble and die. We need to entirely, particularly now when we have so many problems at home, entirely get out of the empire business. We can try to like spread good ideas, be a city on a hill, be like, hey guys, this is a better way to run society. But the idea that we have to get into the internal politics of whether Libya has a dictator or a democracy democracy is not necessarily any better of a situation. If 60% of the people there want to kill the other 40%, democracy ain't going to work out very well. Now, give everybody a vote. Who are they going to vote for?
So what do? You just hope they figure it out on their own?
Yeah, I think so.
Woo!
But I mean, look, it's not. It's like that's just the way the world works. I don't think we have a right to impose our will on other people, and I don't think it's effective to impose our will on other people. Then look at the results. We wasted trillions of dollars. We don't have, for all of these post 9/11 wars, we don't have one victory to show. Even anything that's even remotely close to a victory. Every one of the countries we've been in is worse off now than it was before we got into them. Afghanistan's worse, Iraq's worse, Libya's worse, Syria's worse, Yemen is way, way worse. So it's just...
Outside of Libya and Yemen, is it possible to say that the rest of the world is better off the way Iraq is and the way Afghanistan is today? That they're not overrun?
Iran is better off. For sure. Iran is better off. They've taken over complete influence of that region.
So enemies of our enemies are our enemies.
And now they're our enemies again.
Yeah.
Now that's the problem. Basically, that's the problem that since the end of the Bush administration, all through the Obama administration and into Trump, is that now their big problem is, Iran just has all this influence in the region. What are we going to do about that? It's like, well, maybe if you didn't fucking fight a war on behalf of Iran, then they wouldn't have so much influence. So there are winners, like, to all of this stuff. Honestly, the big winner is, the biggest winner of all of this, says this is Osama bin Laden. He got exactly what he wanted. He drew America into these fucking conflicts. This was literally his plan, we could never destroy America, but we could lure America into the Middle East and make themselves spend themselves into debt, unravel their extend themselves way too far militarily. This is how you get empires to collapse. This was his plan.
Well, that was how they got rid of the Soviet Union, right?
Yeah, and our CIA taught him how to do it.
Yeah, when he was with the
Mujahideen. Yeah.
Yeah, when the Soviet Union was occupying Afghanistan and they couldn't figure it out. And they were like, we got this. We'll figure out how to do it right.
Yep.
It's just no one ever gets it right after you get rid of a dictator. Like, we don't have any examples other than Hitler, right?
Yeah, well, I'm sure there are other examples of getting rid of a dictator, but usually it has to come from the people,
right?
Kind of like, like realizing they want something better.
But of us getting rid
them.
of someone, is there any time that the United States overthrew a dictator and then everything got better?
Yeah, I mean, I guess Japan, if you consider the emperor or
Right.
whatever to be a
but didn't
dictator.
he bowed down, right? Didn't he just
yeah,
surrender?
ultimately.
Was he still in charge?
No, and I don't know that he ever was really in charge.
It's a different
but
culture,
There's
though.
yeah, it's a very different culture. It's a different circumstance, and also, but look, like the thing you were saying, the problem with overthrowing a dictator is that, and it's something that people should consider in a lot of these situations, that things can be worse. You know, like, I mean, maybe sometimes it couldn't be much worse. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, you're not going to get much worse than Hitler or Stalin. I mean, I guess, but it's hard to imagine. But they would say, like, we went to war in World War I with the precursor to Nazi Germany. You know, there's that.
Right.
And it's not to say that there weren't any problems in, like, the Prussian Empire or in the German monarchs or anything like that. But you could go, well, look, they're a bad guy. We're going to get rid of them. It's like, okay, well, look at what you have now.
It's really amazing that we've only dropped 2 nuclear bombs. The 2 atomic bombs have gone off. What's on that?
Yeah.
It's kind of amazing that no other country's ever done that.
Well, it's also because then the Soviets figured out the nuclear bomb. And then ever since there was more than one country, the only time nukes have ever been dropped is when only one country had nukes. And so there is something there about, like, the fact that people are scared to death of someone else also using nukes.
Yeah.
And we've also never been to direct war with a nuclear armed power.
Yeah.
We don't fuck with people with nukes.
No, mutually assured destruction is real.
Oh, yeah.
It really does make people act in a certain way.
Which is really, you know, in some ways counterintuitive, because you'd think, oh, there's more nukes in the world, there's going to be more nuclear attacks in the world. But actually, it turns out that the elites of this world have a lot more in common with each other than they do with me or you. And so they kind of all have this gentleman's agreement where it's like, look, we'll have our soldiers go out and kill each other, but let's not do anything that, like, this is like when even in the Cold War, they'd be like, we'll fight it out in Vietnam. But, like, no one's going to Russia, no one's coming to America. We're not going to actually, you know, do something where we could get fucked over.
But what I was getting to is I wonder if that's always going to be the case, because here we are, you know, obviously 1947, that when they dropped the bombs?
45.
45? So it's quite a while ago.
Yeah.
But not in the terms of, like, the age of the earth.
Not
or
at all.
In terms of history. You know, if in historical times, if you look back on, 1745 versus 1820, it's not that big of a difference. It's not that, when you go to 1545 to 1620, in your eyes, it's like the same time.
Yeah.
Like, how that's so long
No, there's
ago.
World War II vets who are alive right now.
Yeah, 1545, 1445 to 1520, like, that ain't shit. That's nothing.
Yeah.
So it could happen again.
Oh,
And
yes.
the way we look at COVID now, the way we look at a pandemic now, having just gone through it, we could be looking at a nuclear holocaust the same way. We could be looking at someone detonating a bomb in Chicago.
Yeah.
We could be looking at the possibility that we are really locked down. Like, there really are draconian measures to ensure safety and security because they have detonated a nuclear bomb in an American city.
Yeah.
Right now, that sounds like horseshit.
But
if
the
you told
idea
me,
of World War II or World War I would have sounded crazy to people before it happened. And then it really all happened. And then not only did they go to World War I, then they did it again.
Yep.
20 years later, they just went, oh, we're doing it again.
which is, for us, the year 2000, which is like yesterday.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, so it really never stopped.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's like even when you think about, like, like the beef with Iran or something like that, and there'll be like like the CIA overthrew their government in 1953, and then in 1979 they overthrew that government, and they've basically hated America ever since. You know,
Wow.
and you're like, but 1953 to 1979, that's like Bill Clinton to now.
Yeah.
Like, I remember Bill Clinton's presidency.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's a while ago, but it's like, no, if someone, like, just some other government overthrew Bill Clinton, I'd still remember that right now. I'd be like, yeah, these motherfuckers came in and, like, overthrew our government.
Yeah, it's
like
just so easy for us to get used to what we're used to.
Yeah. Did you ever hear the Albert Einstein quote, which I might butcher, but it was something like, he goes, I don't know what weapons will be used to fight World War III, but World War IV will certainly be fought with rocks and sticks.
Yeah.
Or something like that. I might be butchering it a little. But it was basically like, at this point, we're at a place where we really can't war. It's war is endgame. I mean, war with, like, Russia or China or anyone like that. That's even like when people are like, oh, we got to get China back for what they did with this virus. It's like, oh, okay, but our options are limited.
Yeah.
When you got countries with a whole bunch of H-bombs, your options are limited as to what you can do.
Putin
recently
World War
repeated
III
it.
will wipe out civilization. Putin warned, adding World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. Oh, he's a hack.
Did Putin just steal
No,
Einstein's
I
quote?
think he
He's probably
purposely
quoting it.
quoted it. Yeah.
That'd be
probably
kind of great
quoting
if Putin
it,
was just like, I just thought of that.
Maybe he's doing that like in an homage to Joe Biden. Biden's been busted plagiarizing a bunch of times.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I think our version of what's possible is based entirely on what we've experienced. I mean, just like we never remembered those photos of those people with masks on in 1918. You know, our version of reality pre-COVID has been forever altered now that we know that COVID exists.
Yeah.
And there's so many other things that could happen to us. This is the thing, we're so fragile. We always hear about these comets that are whizzing by and these asteroids that get really close to Earth. Like, one of those motherfuckers could slam into us. And I've had some people on that have studied their whole life versions of these scenarios where civilization has been forced to repeat itself because of the fact that we were hit, and that this has probably happened multiple times over the ascension of human civilization, and that it's one of the reasons why you have these ancient structures in Egypt that are very different in the way they're constructed versus the ones from Cleopatra's era, or versus the ones from the time when they built the Great Pyramid of Giza.
Right. And isn't there like because I remember reading about this like a decade ago, but I might not know that much about it, but isn't there stuff about like the water erosion on the Sphinx or something like that, where they can't figure out how this lines up with the time period, because you're like, this is from like way older.
Yeah.
You have that great bit about it in Talking Monkeys in Space, but that whole thing is like, but in all seriousness, it does seem like there's pretty strong indications that civilization is much older than the official history books of like it starts in ancient Sumer 6,000 years ago.
Graham Hancock has spent a giant chunk of his life talking about this, and he brought in Dr. Robert Schoch, who's a geologist from Boston University, and John Anthony West, who's a late great Egyptologist I've had on the podcast a couple of times, and they are all committed to this idea that it's very likely that what we see in Egypt in terms of things that they can date to 2000 BC, this is just one era, and that there's likely multiple eras before that. And the big piece of evidence is the water erosion in the Temple of the Great Sphinx, because they know that they cut these stones out in order to create the Sphinx, but there's massive water erosion on these rocks, and the last time there was significant rainfall in the Nile Valley was 9,000 BC. So instead of 2,500 BC, now it's 9,000 BC. And then they have to think, well, this is thousands of years of rainfall that caused this erosion. So we might be talking 10,000, 11,000 BC. So they don't really know when all this happened, but they do think that it coincides with the end of the Ice Age. At the end of the Ice Age, there's a dramatic climate change that's somewhere around 12,000 years ago, and which would put it at around 10,000 BC. Somewhere around 12,000 years ago, this is where Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock and a bunch of others have really gotten into this younger dryas impact theory. And that is somewhere between 12,000 and 10,000-ish years ago, and it might have been multiple occasions. We were hit. And that this was essentially a restart of civilization in a lot of areas, and an end to the Ice Age in a lot of areas as well. And Randall Carlson's work is fucking spectacular. When he shows you these images that indicate massive melting of ice over a spectacular landscape in a really amazingly short period of time, like a couple days worth of water pouring through, like fucking trillions of gallons, permanently moving the landscape, changing it, moving stones. And he has all these images. And what's even crazier is he got this idea when he was looking at this one area on acid once. And he was like, what happened here? And he got this idea. He was like, what is this? And then he starts researching the end of the Ice Age. And he starts researching comet impacts. And then they start finding all this corresponding evidence when they do core samples. So they're doing core samples, and they find all this iridium and all this nuclear glass, impact glass. They find all this shit around the same area around 12,000 years ago. And they're like, oh my God. And so he starts, he's a brilliant guy, and he can talk about this forever. And they think that it's highly likely that there was, not just here, but in many parts of the world, there was massive impacts that probably didn't kill everybody, but probably basically shut down all progress for who knows how many hundreds, if not thousands of years. And then what you're seeing when you're looking at 2500 BC and all their amazing structures was the knowledge they had left. And all that, and a lot of that was lost to the Library of Alexandria getting burnt down, right? So the stuff that they built later is spectacular, but they had been building pretty amazing shit for most likely thousands of years before we thought they were.
Yeah. Maybe we're due for a reset.
Well, that's the scary thing, right?
This is not some really of the fucking really retarded shit that people are saying out there. You're like, maybe that's the right thing. Maybe we're due for a nice old-fashioned reset.
Well, Douglas Murray, who I had on the podcast, said that when civilizations start crumbling, that's when people get obsessed with gender. And I said, really? And he goes, yeah. He goes, it's in ancient Rome and ancient Greece. There's like a lot of transvestites and a lot of people swapping genders and it's almost like a dissolving of all classifications and barriers and all the things that we took for granted as society. When society really starts falling apart, they start questioning every last fiber of what it means to be a person and what it means to fit into the culture.
Well, I became like politically radicalized from Ron Paul's campaigns. Like that's really where I got interested in politics was like around 2007, 2008 when he was running for president, and I just still to this day love the guy. I think he's the greatest hero ever. But he would always talk about how, like, look, we're on basically this path toward national suicide. My words, not his, but he'd be like, we're on this unsustainable path where we're spending way more than we can afford to spend. We're way too extended militarily, and this is how nations collapse. And this is like, it's going to happen if we keep going this way. So I always kind of had that view in my head. And then to see what's happened with all the cultural stuff over the last, 10 years, while all of that other stuff is going on too. Yeah. And you're like, this really feels
like the end of an empire.
Like a collapsing empire. It really feels like that.
Well, they taught us that in school, that all empires eventually collapse. I mean, whether it's ancient Greece, ancient Rome, all these empires.
British Empire.
They all controlled everything, and they all eventually fell apart.
And it's under very similar circumstances. Like, they're extended too far. They spend themselves too far into debt. They can't maintain it anymore. The culture kind of collapses, like decadence and all this other shit. And it does seem like we have a lot of that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But that isn't necessarily bad. Like, sometimes empires collapse, and it's okay for the people in that country. I mean, like, it was okay for England when the British Empire collapsed. I mean, World War II was bad, but afterward, they're still an okay country. For the Soviet Union, that collapsing was the best thing that ever happened.
That's weird. Those arguments are always strange, right? Because that's the same argument they used about Genghis Khan opening up the path for trade. He killed 10% of the population.
Yes.
In the long run, look.
But you got a new rug.
Yeah, it's good. You can get a nice statue.
You know who would really love this rug? Oh, he's dead.
Whoops.
Forget it.
Does Rand Paul share most of Ron Paul's ideas?
I don't know. I mean, I think probably a lot. He is his son. I know Ron Paul made him read all the right stuff growing up, but he definitely has some areas of disagreement, and he's also just I think he's a different person and has different, strengths and weaknesses, and wasn't quite as
charismatic.
Wasn't as charismatic, wasn't as much of a happy warrior. Ron Paul really enjoyed going out there and telling people the truth as he saw it and talking to people and he didn't really care if, it was always kind of like Ron Paul would say things at the Republican debates and it'd be like, hey, look, you guys might boo me out of the arena, and that's fine. I'm going to go home to my family, and I told the truth. It's the truth, whether you like it or not, and that's fine. You can do that, and I'll leave. And Rand always, I think, it bothered him a little bit more. And but Rand is, I think, to me, like one of the best senators, and I think he's done a lot. He did a lot to really push Donald Trump on the criminal justice reform. He's tried his best to push him on ending the wars. I don't know how successful he's been at that, but I don't know that he's going to inspire people in the same way his father did. I hope he does.
Someone has to. But isn't that what we're always looking for? We're always looking for a hero. when really we need a decentralized government.
Well, yeah, but that doesn't mean you can't have leaders or somebody who like kind of
We're done with
inspires
leaders.
you.
We're done with leaders, Dave.
Yeah.
We tried it out. It doesn't work.
Well, but I don't mean there's a difference between leaders and rulers, right? Like you don't want a ruler,
Right.
But there's people who inspire you, who you learn from, and stuff like that.
You want a leader that doesn't want to be a ruler.
Yes, exactly.
Not
That's
a
what
lot
Ron
of
Paul
those.
was.
Yeah. But isn't that the problem, though? The problem is they get into power. Like, this is one we're seeing with low-level people like governors. Like, the worst governors, they're there's all these lawsuits against Newsom, and he lost one of them recently because he's an autocrat now. He's telling people what they can do. He's writing legislation.
Did you see when Tucker Carlson had Governor Murphy from New Jersey on his show? And it was like right at the height of COVID. Like I think it might have been in May or something like that, but it was still like, pretty new.
No, I didn't see it.
And so like no one's given, I hadn't seen one tough interview with one of these governors. Like every time they came on some news show, it was just like, oh my God, you're saving all these lives and you're wonderful and thank you for all of this. And then they'd have their press conferences, they'd take some questions, but it wasn't. Tucker just starts grilling this guy. And he asked him at one point, he goes, okay, so recently there was like a church service that you shut down and you arrested 4 Jewish people for being at temple. And he goes, what right do you have to do that? He goes, I mean, in the Bill of Rights, it's very clearly defined that the right to religious, expression is, so he's like, so where do you get the authority to shut down a place of worship? And he goes, well, we weren't thinking about the Bill of Rights when we did this. We're just trying to keep people safe. And then he goes, he was like, yeah, but where do you get the authority? And he goes, well, that's above my pay grade. And you're like,
You're
no,
the
that's
governor.
That's exactly your pay grade. That's exactly what your pay. But so that's just that's the mentality that swept over these people. It's a lot. It reminds me a lot of the George W. Bush mentality of instituting torture and all these other things.
Right.
It's like, well, what about laws against this? It's like 9/11, man.
Right.
I don't know about laws and rules, but fucking we're here.
Yeah.
And so they feel like because this thing happened, I don't got to worry about silly little things like the fucking Bill of Rights. Who's got time for that?
We got to be careful they don't pass an act and give it a good name. Like the Patriot
right,
Act.
Exactly.
Like you can't be a non-patriot, you piece of shit. Pass the Patriot Act. If they come up with something like the Safety Act, the Let's Keep Grandma Alive Act.
They do this all the time.
I know, but for this one,
did you see about the anti-lynching bill?
No.
There was like an anti-lynching bill, and they would blast people for being like,
What
so
did
and so
they
was
shove in it?
against the so and so. Like Rand Paul, he was one of the ones. He voted against the anti-lynching bill, and you're like, okay, wait. First of all,
What else was in there?
Isn't lynching already illegal?
Yeah.
Like so explain to me what exactly was in there. And then it turns out that Rand Paul's problem was that this really broadly defines what a hate crime is. And now it seems that like if someone were to like get in a bar fight, you could like give them like 20 years under like some hate crime legislation. And he's like, let's slow down on that. That seems a little crazy. And then they're like, you're just for lynching. And it's like, wait. This is really weird, dude. You can't just name a bill something and then say if you're for, but Patriot Act, all this shit.
Yeah,
That's what it all is.
They should not be able to name bills provocative names. They should just have numbers.
Yes.
And that's it. You only get a number. You can't get a name. Names have a lot of shit attached to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially anti-lynching.
But even like they call Obamacare the Affordable Care Act. Everything they put is like this nice thing that nobody could possibly be against.
Why would you be against affordable care?
Yeah, what do you hate people?
Come on, bro. Do you hate people?
That's it, though.
What's wrong with you? Yeah, Dave. Listen, I think we fucking covered it all and we fixed everything.
Did we?
No.
Where was that? Was it like around a half hour
20 minutes ago.
20 minutes. That was the exact moment.
We nailed it.
Everything went good.
We just did like 3.5 hours. How long did we do?
Well, you guys were talking before we started.
So, okay. 3 hours?
3 hours for the show.
3 hours,
You
bro.
lose all sense of time.
Yeah, it flies by in here. I just know when I really have to pee. We should probably wrap it up. Let everybody know your Twitter or Instagram, all that jazz.
My Twitter is @ComicDaveSmith. The podcast is Part of the Problem and the Legion of Skanks, of course. And Twitter, Instagram, they just started me an account, @The Problem Dave Smith on Instagram.
At the problem?
Or The Problem Dave Smith.
You're a problem? Is that what's going on?
I think so. I don't run it, but they
Who
put
runs
clips
it?
out of shit. Some of the Gas Digital people started it for me because I'm retarded and don't have an Instagram in 2020.
Yeah, how did you not have an Instagram?
I don't know. I'm just like, I can't do any more social
get it.
media.
I get it.
you know.
Well, that's why you're so good at these fucking conversations, because you're actually paying attention to shit.
I spend too much time on Twitter. As
There it
is.
is.
Yep.
The problem, Dave Smith.
I got
8,000 followers.
I got no
Jesus.
followers on there. Well, we
We'll
just
try to pump
started
you
it.
up. We'll pump you up.
There you go. Follow me on Twitter. I got a little bit of followers on there.
Twitter's dying. It's dying.
It
The
is.
president's going to kill it on his last days in office. That's what I heard.
Really? That'd be something. Now it's just a war of who can kill who first,
You imagine?
Twitter or the president.
He just makes it Twitter illegal. His last few days in office. His car's more harm than good. It's over.
But then Twitter blocks his tweet saying
Yeah.
that it's illegal, so no one knows. It's just a war of Jack Dorsey
They
versus
just
Donald
stay
Trump.
open. Fuck you. You're on the way out. Biden's like, I support Twitter, and I'm going to wear a mask in my profile.
Then he's like, what, someone tell me what Twitter is.
My profile, I'm hee-haw. My pronouns. All right, Dave. Thanks, brother. I appreciate
you.
it. This was fun. Goodbye,
Absolutely.
everybody.